So we're going to get started, and we're really loud today. Okay, so let's go ahead and take roll call. All trustees are present except Trustee Wake and Trustee Bregstad, who won't be here tonight, and I'm expecting that Trustee Kendall is on her way. And other than that, all other trustees are present. So I'll welcome everybody, and we'll stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. So now, item number 3 on the agenda is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. Are there any requests from any trustees to make any kind of modification to the agenda as it has been set? Seeing none, then we'll proceed. Item number 4 is to approve 2 sets of minutes. The first are the minutes from the special meeting work session on the 4 topics we discussed on February 20th, 2018, which begin on page 6. Are there any corrections to those minutes that anyone saw? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Moved by Trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Newbold. All those in favor of approving the special meeting work session minutes from February 20th, please indicate your approval by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to the Board of Trustees regular meeting from the February 27th meeting, which begin on page 13. Are there any corrections that anyone had noted in those minutes? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting on February 27th? Is there a motion? Moved by Trustee Duggar, seconded by Trustee Smith. Maybe I didn't say that right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the regular board meeting of February 27th, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous to all trustees. Well, I guess Trustee Kendall's abstaining or voting on the minutes, or? Okay, I just didn't see your hand up, sorry. And so Trustee Kendall is now here, and that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Unless there's a question down there? Okay. People are voting sequentially. It's confusing me. I apologize. So now we come to the part of the agenda that is public comment on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for the public to let the district and the Board of Trustees know if there's anything you'd like to alert us to that's going on in the district. It can be any topic you'd like. It's a topic that isn't going to be on our agenda, so that there won't be discussion by the trustees and there won't be any decision-making made. If it's appropriate to add something to a later agenda, we will do so. The reason that we do it this way is the public has the right to know under a state open meeting act of anything that the board would be making a decision on and discussing, so we have to give adequate notice to the public on those items to put them on the agenda. But we welcome any other topics. If you can state your name, spell your first and last name if there's an unusual spelling, and if you represent a group, identify the group, and if you can limit your comments to around 3 minutes, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Excuse me, Melanie Charlson, President, Missoula Education Association, Vice President, MEA MFT. Just wanted to alert you that yesterday was the closing of the filing window for state legislator candidates. Missoula Education Association has 2 candidates who are running for state seats. Dustin Hoon out at Big Sky is running in the Lolo area, and Matt Bell is running here in the Missoula area, House 94. I need to get Dustin's house number to you. Just wanted to alert you of that. Missoula Education Association, in conjunction with other members of Montana Federation of Public Employees, soon to be known as MFPE, will be conducting interviews. We will invite all candidates to come to our Missoula EA offices and sit for candidate interviews for potential endorsement from our state affiliate. Once those interviews are finished and our endorsements are approved, I'll be sharing those with you. I just want you to know that 2 of our Missoula EA members are fully engaged in that process, and we're excited for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, then we'll continue on with our agenda. The next item 6 on our community connection, which is actually the community of our district connection, is our counselor leadership team, and Karen Allen's going to do the introductions.
Yes, thank you very much. I have the privilege of working with the counselor leadership team, which is a volunteer group that helps support all counselors in the district. And they, I must say, look forward to an opportunity to give an update to the board. Chairman Holland has been sort of a mentor, I think, of this group, and they speak very positively about this relationship and this opportunity. So I'm going to let Lindsay Myers introduce the group, and they're going to share an update with you.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm Lindsay Myers. I'm the school counselor at Lewis and Clark and on the counselor leadership team. And I want to introduce the other counselors that are here. We have Amy Friedman from CS Porter and Brittany Wilson-Thompson from Big Sky and Miranda Taylor, who's interning with Brittany, and she did a month of interning with me at Lewis and Clark. So thanks for having us. These guys are going to take over.
Lindsay's just going to pull up our PowerPoint for us. We just have a few minutes with you tonight, and thank you for giving us your time. We could talk for hours about school counseling, so we had to work really hard to trim that down. But again, you know, we're from all different levels, and we're just going to give you a brief little view into some of the things that we've been doing.
So here's our agenda for this evening. We're going to be taking a look at what have been some pretty significant changes in the old counseling model and what has happened recently, I would say within the last 10 to 20 years, but even the last 10 years have made some huge shifts in education. Then we'll be looking at that model and then looking towards where we're going in the future. So I'm going to make this interactive a little bit. I've heard that sometimes you need a little action at this point. I think everybody does. So 6 o'clock in the evening, I want you to turn to your elbow partner and think about the answer to this question. What do you remember about your school counselor? Just do a quick 30-second pair share. All right, wrapping it up. Thank your partner. Let's just hear from a couple people around the room what kind of things came up. Just quick shout out.
And we won't be offended with the answer.
Yeah.
My counselor told me I was going to college. He didn't care what my parents said, I was going to college.
You were going to college, good, because some people get the I'm not going to college, you're not worthy of college. What else came up?
My guidance counselor said, stand-up comedy seems like a good hobby. So,
It works for you, Michael, thanks.
yeah, maybe. I mean, still looking to college, but yeah.
Did anyone have, I didn't even know who my counselor was. Okay, didn't know I had one maybe. So we'll go to the next slide. This is a little bit of some of the themes that maybe you experienced. And in the old model, there was a lot of inconsistency and a lot of negativity surrounding the counseling model and what counselors actually do in schools.
So unfortunately, we're not going to have time to show this video, but we can certainly send the link to you. But essentially what we wanted to show you with this is that we have gone from a just reactive mode in counseling to, whoever's in crisis, we help that individual, to a more preventative model where we are looking at educating all students in the skills that they're going to need to be healthy academically, emotionally, and career ready. And so this video was just summing up that if you wait till everyone comes in, then you're going to be juggling so many kids in crisis all the time. So we really are trying to prevent that by giving them the skills before a crisis arises. So that's really where the new school counseling model is headed.
So thanks, Michael, for bringing that up. Previously, school counselors were referred to as guidance counselors, and so their primary focus was those vocational choices. So you're going to college or you're not going to college. To be qualified to be a guidance counselor, you mostly had to take a few classes, nothing more so than that. And it was, again, focusing just on that individual service at the time. And so fast forward to now, we're working towards school counselors focusing on more than just career choices such as personal and social awareness, as well as academic and career. To be a school counselor now, you're required to have a master's degree as well as meet state licensing requirements. And those help us provide a comprehensive school counseling program. And we also have a national model with counseling standards that guide us in our practice.
So you may see this logo from ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, and that's one that we've been reviewing continually throughout our counselor leadership team this year.
So just to give you a snapshot of the model, with the ASCA counseling model, we have a foundation as counseling departments. So you have a mission as your department of what you want to achieve in your school, and you have standards just like teachers would of specific career, academic, behavioral standards you want all students to be able to master. In addition to just meeting one-on-one with students, which was kind of the old model, we also deliver guidance lessons in the classroom and meet with small groups of students. So we're delivering our information in multiple ways. We also do action plans. So, if you're following the model, you're making a curriculum plan. We want all students to be able to demonstrate such and such skill, but you also have closing the gap action plans. So you're looking at your particular school and seeing where those achievement gaps are, whether that's based off gender or socioeconomic status, and then what can we do as a counseling department? What evidence-based interventions can we put in place to actively remedy that gap? And so that's our goal. And then we always are looking at data, which you'll see a little bit of tonight, to see, is this intervention effective, or do we need to come back to the drawing board? So even, the best intentioned counselors, perhaps that intervention doesn't work with your population. So always looking and using data to be the most effective counselor that we can.
So here's a look at taking these four components at all three levels. You might notice that perhaps individual planning looks smaller at the elementary level than it does at the high school level, yet the curriculum piece is much bigger at the elementary level than it is at the high school level. So this is a good illustration to show that at all three divisions we have all four components, but the way that we break up percentage-wise looks a little bit different at each level.
So just to give you a little bit of data examples, we're going to give you one from each level. We're going to give you an elementary example. That's data around a support group. We're going to give you some middle school data that was taken school-wide, and then I'm also going to share with you some data from Big Sky High School, which is grade level specific.
At Lewis and Clark Elementary, I ran a fourth grade girls group that focused on anxiety and coping strategies around that. And so the curriculum we used was Coping Cat, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy based curriculum. And so we did that group for 5 weeks. So as you'll see on the graph, We conducted a pre and post test based on what the curriculum was aiming at students to learn. And so the blue bar identifies their abilities pre-test and pre-curriculum versus the red bars identify their post-test abilities. And so each column represents a different skill that they learned throughout that group. And so if, for example, you look at the first one, 50% of students in the group were able to identify anxious feelings before any curriculum was used, and then post-intervention, 100% of the students in the group were able to identify anxious feelings.
So the district has done an excellent job this year and has been working towards helping with what I think is a really intense problem that we have in Montana. We continually come up on the high side of rates of suicide. And this year we've really worked hard to train our HPE teachers, counselors, and other mental health professionals to deliver what's called SOS, or Signs of Suicide curriculum. So this year we worked 6 through 8 at all middle schools to help students recognize when they have depressive symptoms, or recognize depressive symptoms in friends or family members, and also to highlight the difference between kind of depression and suicide, but also the difference between just being sad, a little bit sad, kind of normal emotions, versus maybe being depressed. And then we also touched on a little bit about self-injury as well in this lesson. The acronym ACT that we want students and adults to walk away with in each building is to acknowledge, and to be able to acknowledge that you or a friend or a family member might need support, and that it's serious, it's a serious problem. And then to show care, and to be able to do that, it gives lots of examples for students to be able to talk to people and know what to say appropriately that could help the situation. And then to find trusted adults and to be able to tell. So at Washington Middle School, they focused on all 550 students. From the individual lessons, 35 students requested check-ins after the lesson, 28 reported suicidal ideation in the last year, and 50 students indicated depressive symptoms. So we had a multitude of ways that we followed up, and this is where multi-tiered systems of support really come into play, where you can focus on all the components of people that can help in this situation when you identify kids with significant needs. You can read the many ways that we followed up, and I would just say that one of the highlights for me was really connecting to kids that may have been off our radar, and we were able to find support and then connect them to people, adults in the building, as well as adults outside of our building, in the community or in their home.
So another piece of data that we look at, so what Amy just talked about, is data kind of justifying the need for these types of programs. And when we take that, we can look at, we really need to do this. What can we expect for a number of suicide assessments that we need to do when we do this program? So that is informing us. And then we also like to take outcome data, which is the end result. That's kind of what I'm going to give an example of today. I've been fortunate enough to be on an amazing freshman support team this year at Big Sky High School. That includes myself, Jennifer Courtney, our assistant principal, our social worker, our project success counselor who works with substance abuses. We have our graduation coach, our Native American specialist, our intern Miranda. I'm probably forgetting someone, but we have come together as a team, and as the model says, trying to prevent crises from happening and giving skills and education to kids ahead of time, preloading. And we did 5 lessons in the classrooms for all freshmen, and we divided them by cohorts so you were familiar with the support staff that came into your classroom. And teachers actually felt like it built a sense of community, and we had some really great conversations with kids, everything ranging from when the holidays aren't so happy to some SOS stuff to prepping for finals. So the data we looked at here, you can go ahead to the next slide, Lindsay, is the outcome data. So on this graph, what you'll see is the percent failing grades in core subjects in our freshmen over semesters. On the far left there, you'll see the fall 2017. that's this most recent semester of our freshmen with this support push-in. And as you can see, comparing to previous semesters of freshman grades, we had a significant reduction in those failing grades, and we really think that that support team is an essential part of that. So, using this data, we want to continue. We want to put that same plan in place for freshmen next year and also continue with sophomores. And, to be able to do this at all grade levels, it really is a collaborative effort. I think of it takes a village to raise a child, but it really does. You can't just have a counselor working in isolation on these interventions. It's impossible with our caseloads, but when you have a support team and an administrator that understands mental health and how to support that support team in their interventions, collaborating with teachers, you can see some really amazing results. So we're really excited about that, and we're taking data from their feedback after semester 1 and continuing with lessons. Next month we'll be doing healthy relationships. So that's been a really great experience and just an example of how data can show you whether you're on the right track, and sometimes we're not, but we think we're onto something here.
So moving forward, I think Brittany did a good job to emphasize collaboration. So collaboration coming from you, and then we'll be delivering this presentation to the principals at each division as well, and then sharing it with faculty members, staff, support people in the building. Everyone coming together makes our program successful. And then making sure that you're able to support your administrators throughout the district. We've already been working this year on updating our job description, making sure that we are data-driven in our plans. We have a counselor curriculum team that's working really hard to make a comprehensive K-12 program based on the ASCA model and look at those standards for our program in counseling. And next meeting we'll have in May, we'll get all counselors in the district together to really make sure we're on the same page with the ASCA model and continuing to make sure that ultimately we are providing the best program so that our students can have the best achievement.
Any questions?
Thanks for this presentation. That's great stuff. I am wondering about, in the Signs of Suicide program, when you do have, that was a lot of kids who need attention, when you do need to work with them to connect them to services outside the school district, are there barriers you're running up against, or how is that referral working?
During this program, we knew that Porter statistics were a large amount higher than Washington's. We knew that we would need a lot of support, so we asked our school psychologist to come in, our school social worker. We had Kristen Kellermine came in to help one day, and we had a lot of mental health professionals come in to support what needed to happen in order to follow up and make sure that no one was dropped from our radar. I would say there are really good support systems in Missoula for families. I think the things that we continually run up against are parents that maybe don't take it as seriously as we feel like it might need to be taken. So we do the best we can to continue to try to give them the supports that they need and community resources, but it's not always well received. We do also provide students with individual resource cards and try to let them know that there's a warm line that's available 24/7. There's even a text line now that makes it really easy and available for kids to get help for themselves or for their friends right in the moment if they need it. So we give them a little card and have them take that away.
Thank you, that's great work.
One other barrier I just wanted to add, we're currently doing SOS at Big Sky. Today and yesterday and some follow-up tomorrow morning that will be done. We've done 23 suicide assessments in our sophomore class. So that's the number of kids that from their screener were needing a suicide assessment immediately. And what was talked about today with support staff is the need for more resources for that urgent mental health response, because as counselors we can screen for suicide, but the the further psychological evaluation that needs to happen for some of those students that are extremely high risk. We don't have a lot of resources where we can get kids in soon enough. And so, we would love to look at partnerships with the community to have more of a streamlined way to send those kids that are suicidal right now, that need an evaluation right now.
Thanks. It's great to hear all of this, and we've heard a couple of reports over the past few board meetings of all of the work that's being done across the district to try to support kids' mental health and their social skills, such an important piece. And I'm curious, when you're able to do groups like you talked about with the ninth graders and so on, as to what part of the day that's happening in. Is there a classroom teacher present? I just so value the expertise that you bring to this work, and I know that teachers who are teaching subject matter often feel that they don't have that expertise, and yet they are the front line in knowing the kids better and seeing them on a more ongoing basis. The numbers are so huge. So I'm wondering if they're with you and able to kind of see the information that you're presenting to students and learning alongside, or are you there without? How does that work? How are you able to? Yeah.
So, I think that's probably different at each school. I can tell you, what happens at Big Sky with our freshman push-in lessons. The teachers are there and are generally interacting with that and enjoying being able to get that information and have those deeper level conversation with kids. As far as groups, those are not run at the high school as often. It's hard to coordinate with kids having different schedules. So that's something I'd more have maybe Amy speak to.
At Porter, we typically go into our HPE classes because a lot of the mental health components fall into their curriculum already. So we're working hard at co-teaching and, if nothing else, having them be there while we present different curriculum to the kids so they can then continue it when we're gone. We also have an enhancement period that we use sometimes that's, set aside for RTI-driven interventions, as well as social and emotional connections and things that kids might need in that realm.
Go for it.
We'll talk about the elementary level a little bit. So in classroom lessons, teachers are always there when I'm presenting curriculum to kids, because then they're using the language throughout the day. When we're talking about emotional regulation or problem solving, they're always involved in that lesson and using that language. And then for small group counseling, typically groups kind of build on what kids have learned in the classroom, and so teachers aren't there for that, and we just try to find the best time that's best for those kids. And teachers in my school are really happy to have kids go to group and build on those skills, and so they're pretty flexible with scheduling stuff. Yeah.
I was just curious, with a lot of this, the mental health support, is there any role built in right now that addresses leadership opportunities for students? And I bring that up to say, often with and I can speak as someone that was in special ed my entire career, the narrative is always, and it's very important, it's resources. It's, you need this, this is a resource that can benefit you. But there's so much that can be gained from, this is what you can do. This is this is the role you can play. And outlining that you can give back. You are a resource for other people. And I just, is there something in there that, takes that and nurtures leadership skills, or gives opportunity for that peer support or leadership development?
I know I can speak from a middle school perspective. At our school, we have the student ambassadors, and it's a leadership role. We also have our student council. We try to give a lot of opportunities for students that want it, but also for kids that maybe we recognize might need to develop some of those leadership skills. So when we do our student ambassadors interviews, we try to get teacher input as well as kids that are interested, and maybe give kids an opportunity to become leaders instead of maybe giving those opportunities immediately to kids that are leaders. And this year I had the pleasure to take a group of kids to the MBI Youth Conference that was held in Missoula, and we're still continuing with actions that came from that conference that we're integrating into our school and out into the community.
think there's room for more. But yeah, again, acknowledge, care, tell, empowering students to come about a friend they're concerned about. I've seen a really great response to that. Kids are really open about that. And we've even pulled in older students to talk to our younger students during guidance lessons about like, don't do this. This is what I did freshman year and it did not work out well for me. So, but there's not like a formal way that we have that at the high school that I'm aware of, but I like the idea.
I can talk about elementary too. And I think a lot of schools probably tailor things a bit differently. At Lewis and Clark, we have a couple things. Student council, this year we have an eco team, and the kids are learning about how to have a sustainable school, and different kids apply for that. Similar to middle school, where we try to maybe not handpick kids, but give kids the opportunity who maybe wouldn't get it otherwise. I am also doing a rock climbing team with one of the special ed teachers, and we kind of pick kids that need to work on taking risks and building confidence, and we talk about leadership and how that transfers to the classroom and the playground. And then we also use a lot of older kids in a mentor role, and they can go to younger kids' classrooms, and that builds confidence for those kids. Yeah.
Thank you. This is also great. Can you talk about how the kids at the elementary level are identified for those small groups? Are they identified by teachers, or do they self-identify, or how do they get involved with that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. In the older grades, in 4th and 5th grade, in the beginning of the school year, I always do a needs assessment in my first classroom lesson, and I talk about the different groups I have, and kids can sign up for them if they want to. And so I think most of the kids that were in Miranda's group had all identified that they wanted to be in that group. I also get information out to teachers, and so teachers are referring kids refer themselves as we go along in the year, and I always have information in the newsletter that goes to parents, and so parents often call and refer kids too. And teachers, as social skill needs kind of pop up, will refer kids. And the groups can be flexible around any topic. They can start anytime, so it can be just based on what the kids need.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, do you guys do anything in your efforts to address conflict resolution, or do you target a way for students who are being bullied, to come forward in a way that's safe for them, because that's such an underground kind of thing because of the shame that's involved in that. So I'm wondering what you guys do about those two issues.
So something we really are focusing on as a counseling department at Big Sky is the healthy relationships component. And I think that, translates to friendships and communicating with adults. Also just self-regulation with emotions, and identifying when there is a mental health need. But, there's not a formal conflict resolution system in place that I'm aware of. We do have, I think, having support staff so close with students, they're generally pretty comfortable coming to us if there is an issue with bullying, but there's also a bullying report form on our website, but there isn't a formal conflict resolution curriculum in place right now that I know of.
So at the elementary level, the two main curriculums that I teach around those ideas you talked about, we have a conflict resolution curriculum called Kelso's Choices, which is geared towards younger kids, but also is appropriate for older kids and even adults, the different solutions that kids learn about how to solve problems. And we also have an emotional regulation curriculum called the Zones of Regulation, which teaches kids how to identify how they're feeling and then how to use a strategy or a tool to take care of that in a safe way, when those two things really go together, solving a problem and making sure that you're taking care of your emotions. And then I try to teach, starting in maybe 2nd grade, really defining what bullying is so that kids understand the difference between mean behavior that they can take care of on their own and bullying, when it becomes bullying behavior, and how that can be a really big problem and how to take care of that in a different way. I would say there's probably less stigma for elementary school kids to report that to adults, but we definitely see that as they get into 5th grade, and so I'm trying really hard to get in the classrooms and make sure that they know the difference between tattling and reporting and what's a big problem and what they should talk to adults about.
Any other questions? Well, seeing none, I want to thank you for coming. I especially want to thank you because I know it took a lot of time to put together a presentation that is so efficient in communicating what you're doing. And as you can tell, we would love to have you here for an hour probably, but we have other business to attend to. So I really appreciate the attention to detail that you hit your high points. You each brought a separate area of skills to this presentation, and as you can tell from the questions, we'd probably have a longer conversation if we didn't have other things going on too. But thank you very much for, your everyday work, for your team's work, and also for putting together such a really remarkable presentation that lets us know what's going on in the school district. So thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now we'll keep going on the agenda, which are on to student trustee reports. And we have, I think, is Ibby available too?
Ibby is, and I have Marina's report.
Okay, so we'll start with Big Sky, and then we'll move to Sentinel, and then we'll move to Seawood.
Yeah, I'm a little lonely over here, but it's okay. Not a big deal. Yeah. Over at Big Sky, we're welcoming the spring weather. We're looking forward to having a great last couple months of the school year with many activities going on. I'll dive right into some of our academic activities. Some of our senior projects are starting to surface as the end of the school year comes. One senior project, she brought the Buckle Up for Lauren campaign. This is someone from Fairfield, Montana, who was killed 2 years ago in a car accident, and her father comes schools around Montana to present. It's the Buckle Up Blue for Lauren campaign. Lauren's father talked about how his daughter was killed in a car accident in 2016 due to her choice to not wear a seatbelt. He gave a powerful message regarding the importance of living a life to the fullest every day and making smart choices. Lauren's father has traveled to dozens of towns throughout the state to spread this message and inspire hundreds of high school students across Big Sky. So he gave two two-hour presentations, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to Big Sky students in our cafeteria, and I attended the afternoon presentation. It's a very powerful message, and I'm so glad that so many Big Sky students got to experience that presentation and hear the message that he had to share. In other news, our Health Science Academy sophomores, last month they took avalanche training over at Big Sky. We had some trainers come and train sophomores, and they actually went snowshoeing up Lolo Pass, and I guess they had quite the snowstorm up there, so it was pretty exciting for them. maybe less fun for some, but anyway, our physics class recently went to the university and visited the Payne Planetarium. So that was an interesting activity for our physics class. Recently, our IB diploma candidates, I am not myself one, but the ones I do know are very, this point in the year, very caught up in their work, very busy, and I can tell they're really putting the work in, but they recently submitted their extended essays, which is a big deal for those students as we get to that closer to the end of the year. All freshmen at Big Sky are doing art integration activities for 2 half-days today and tomorrow with the Spark Arts teachers, and there's going to be an exhibition show tomorrow night at Big Sky at 5:30. Moving on to athletics, track, softball, tennis, and lacrosse are starting up. We have record numbers actually in our track team and our tennis team, so that's exciting for those teams. We have our Special Olympics. Last month went to Lost Trail for the Winter Olympics. We actually had several Big Sky athletes place first and do very well, and we had many para-educators from Big Sky go with the Special Olympics team, so it was really fun being able to send them off, and we plan to send them off once again for the Spring Olympic, for the next set of Special Olympics here in May. We're going to have a respect rally, and we're going to send them off on an assembly, which is always a joy to do that at our assemblies. Moving on to arts, the Big Sky High School Jazz Band this Friday will be playing in the Buddy DeFranco Jazz Festival at the university with famous guest artists and clinicians. Big Sky's experienced some past success at this festival, and they are preparing well and look forward to trying their best again. Last week, actually, we had a student-led drama production titled The Importance of Being Earnest. Last week in Portland, Oregon, we had 11 Big Sky choir students go to All Northwest. We actually had all 11 of those students that tried out an audition for All Northwest actually made it. So that's a big accomplishment for our choir program and exciting for them. Last week, our Big Sky Wind Ensemble performed at the AA Band Festival last Monday and Tuesday at the U of M, collaborating with several other high schools around western Montana. In other news, we had Diversity Week a couple weeks back in February. We had Joe Stone, who's a local here and motivational speaker, Native American dancers. We had slam poetry performances from our Erie students and musical performance from our Big Sky student-led band perform at that assembly, and Diversity Week was a great success with many presentations delivering positive messages for our students. Excuse me. The Big Sky High School Envirothon team just recently received funding from the Missoula Conservation District of the USDA after students proposed a budget and asked for their support at their board meeting just last week. They will travel to Lewistown and complete at Montana Envirothon April 22nd and 24th. And lastly, we have the Big Sky National Honor Society planning an Easter egg hunt and petting zoo for youngsters on Sunday, March 25th at 9:30 a.m. This event will take place at Big Sky, and proceeds, planning to have our proceeds go back to the Big Sky's NHS. That's all I have to say for Big Sky. Thank you.
Thanks for such a great report. And moving on to Marina's report then.
Thank you. Marina sends her regrets, but I'm happy to share the report from Sentinel High School. Both Sentinel basketball teams became division champions and took off to the state basketball tournament this past weekend. The boys fell to Great Falls High, while the girls team took second place against Helena. Congratulations to all the athletes for a phenomenal season. Now that basketball has come to a close, spring sports are starting up, just as Gabe indicated. Softball is holding tryouts today. Tennis, track, and Special Olympics track will be beginning their practices this week as well. Last Monday and Tuesday, 2 teams of Sentinel students competed in the 3rd largest Academic World Quest competition in the nation. One team, which included Oliver Chin, Maddie Nati, Maeve Monahan, and Katie Lindsay, took 4th place, and the other team took 9th. The Sentinel HOSA chapter, which is the Health Occupation Student Association chapter, traveled to Helena on Monday and will be there tonight for awards, getting home late. The Sentinel Jazz Band will be spending Thursday and Friday at the U of M Jazz Festival. And the Sentinel Drama Department will be presenting The Odd Couple on April 5th, 6th, and 7th in the Margaret Johnson Theater. Tickets are $6, so come out and support your drama department. Additionally, Sentinel Drama will be traveling with the Big Sky and Hellgate Drama Departments to New York City, March 21st through 27th. They will see 5 shows, tour museums, the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, the 9/11 Museum, Central Park, and much more. Quite an opportunity. Sentinel students took part in a variety of mathematics tests and competitions on Tuesday, March 6th for the Montana Council of Teachers of Mathematics contest at the University of Montana. Stacy Hargesheimer, a U.S. government and history teacher, received a 1 class at a time grant this month from KPAX for $250 to buy hands-on activities and curriculum for her classes. So she's very appreciative of that. And that's it for Sentinel. I'll move over to Ibby. Hi, Ibby. Are you ready to give your report?
Yep, I'm all set.
Thank you. You're good to go.
All right, sounds great. So for the last 2 weeks, Cedar Point High School has had a 5-day week instead of a typical 4. We've had to go on Fridays, so to make that a little less, a little easier to bear, the school's put both Fridays as beach days where students and staff get dressed up like beach bums for the day, and there was even a beach volleyball tournament during lunch. Anyway, but this is all because during the summer, at the first week of school, it was canceled due to the Rice Ridge Fire, which threatened the town. So now that that's over, we are back to our 4 days week. Everyone is very happy, and everyone's counting down to spring break. But otherwise, boys and girls basketball has come to a close, and both teams took some hardware home from the season. Girls took second at districts and advanced to divisional tournament where they ended their season with a 13-10 overall score. And then the boys ran the table to districts, going 10-0 into a conference and went on to take the district title. They also went on to divisionals but lost out and ended the season at 15-7. Now that's over. Track season has started up, and yesterday was the first after-school practice. However, there are still mountains of snow on the ground outside, so they'll be working out inside the gym until the snow melts. In addition to the winter sports, Cedar Swan High School Nordic ski team finished their season at the Rendezvous ski race in West Yellowstone back on March 3rd, so they all got to race there, which was very exciting. And then the outdoor club did a ski trip to Blacktail back on March 3rd, and they also have another ski trip planned for this Saturday to Lost Trail, so that'll be exciting. And then outside of sports, this last week on Wednesday we had a career fair, which included the 8th graders from the elementary school and everyone at the high school. And in the morning, students got to choose 3 sessions that they were interested in, career fields that sounded interesting to them. And those ranged from hospitality to computer science to cosmetology. And they got to pick their session, and they went and talked with professionals in that field. And then in the afternoon, they did 2 sessions that had interviewing skills and personal finance and about writing resumes, so some future prepping stuff. And then outside of that, the Leaders Club is doing some stuff as well. They helped out with the career fair, and they will be working with the Lions Club here in Seeley Lake for a St. Patrick's Day dinner this Saturday. And they also are going to be doing another project with the Lions Club. They'll be doing an Easter egg hunt for the children of the community on Easter Sunday. And they are still going every Friday to the elementary school to work with elementary school students during their lunch and do activities with them. That's all I have.
Thanks,
All right,
Ivy.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And although
I'd
Evie's
like
gone.
to add that Michael Beers was a presenter at the career fair as well, so thanks,
yay.
Michael.
Yay! Well, and I want to thank all the trustees for such thorough reports and for actually highlighting such a diverse group of activities that are going on in the school. It takes a lot of time to compile that information and to emphasize how many important things are happening. So thanks. You're the only one here, but I know that each month you really spend a lot of, all trustees, student trustees spend time to make sure that they capture what's going on in the schools in a much broader sense than individual activities you're involved in. And so I know, especially for seniors this time of year, you feel free to leave anytime you want, because I'm sure you've got a lot on your plate right now. You bet. But thank you for being here. And we'll move on to 7B, which are announcements from the superintendent.
Thank you. I always feel a little bit hesitant to follow up the student trustees. They give such great reports. I would direct your attention to page 25 in the packet. There are a number of calendar appointments that are included. I would just like to highlight a few and make mention of a couple significant events. First of all, this Thursday, which is March 16th, there will be trustee building visits at Russell, Chief Charlo, and Cold Springs, and I would like to call to the trustees' attention that the schedule has changed. Again, we have Irish dancers in an assembly at one of the schools, so we've reworked the schedule so that you'll be able to view all the schools in session. So it'll begin at Russell Elementary at 8:30 instead of beginning at Chief Charlo. So Russell at 8:30 a.m. Proceed then to Cold Springs at 9:30 and Chief Charlo at 10:30. It's hard to believe, but Gabe referenced it earlier. It is really becoming spring, and spring break will begin March 26th and run through Friday, March 30th. During that time, the administration offices will be open, but no students will be in class. We would normally have a second board meeting in March, and that would be held on Tuesday, March 27th. We have canceled that for 2 reasons. Primarily, number one, it's spring break week, but also with the closing date for filing of candidates for school board elections, as well as the deadline for announcing write-in candidacy. We'll need to come together Thursday, April 5th at 6 p.m. to approve the final ballots for the election. So that should be a brief meeting, but it's an important one, so it's important that we have a quorum that evening. So that's Thursday, April 5th. This past week was a significant week in the K-8s. Parent-teacher conferences were completed, and that's such an important time to partner with parents and families to review what's been accomplished to date and really to set the table for the remainder of the school year. And so my appreciation to all the staff who dedicate significant hours in preparation and then to actually meet with families. We will have a set of parent-teacher conferences in the high schools. They're listed on the calendar for the week of April 6th through 10th, but there's actually a variable schedule. Those conferences are actually conducted in the evenings at the high school, not during the school day. It's exclusively evening time. There is a day that is listed on the calendar, April 20th, as the day that high school students are off as a result of conferences. But the conferences, as I said, will take place over the next few weeks on variable schedules. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. And that moves us on to item 7C. Are there any announcements from any trustees? See none. Then we'll move on to 8A1, which is to approve the audit. I'm going to change the language. We're going to accept the audit report because we can't really change it. We either accept it or we don't. So we'll be determining whether we accept the audit report for the period ending June 30th, 2017. So Pat and Dan, I don't know if one of you want to start this process, and I know Stephanie from Anderson Zermulin is here to walk us through that company's actual audit of our district.
Thank you, and I would like to welcome Stephanie to to present the audit report. Stephanie is the partner with Anderson Zermulin. She's the partner in charge on this audit, and her staff began working in the doing field work in near the end of last year, and I appreciate her taking the time to be here, and also want to recognize Dan Parrish, our accounting supervisor, who is our main liaison with the auditors during their field work and has been for quite a number of years. So Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add? All right, then Stephanie, if you want to take it from here, thank you.
Okay, so it's on when it's read. Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. And we are just going to go over a draft of the audit report because we usually present this at the second March meeting. And it's ready to be finalized as soon as you guys accept it and Pat reviews it in a little bit more detail. Dan's gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, so I don't think there'll be any changes. Might be a little bit of wording changes on some of the footnotes because they are your footnotes and they should represent how management wants them worded as long as they meet standards. So I passed out an agenda, a 2-page agenda. We did send out, I think Pat said that they sent out the PDF of the draft financial statements in your packet, and then there's one uploaded to the website, I think he said. So if anyone wants to review that, I didn't bring hard copies of that because it would be killing a lot of trees if we did that. So, but everything I want to go over is pretty much on the agenda here, and I'm going to keep it as brief as possible because I know you have a full agenda tonight. But I ascertain any questions that you want to ask at the end for sure, or throughout the presentation. So most of the staff that worked on the audit were from our Missoula office, and the manager on the job was Grace McCoy. She's been on the job for about 3 years. And then we had Travis Foshag was the in-charge accountant. And field work went very well. Everything we had asked for prior to starting the audit, we do a list of items needed for audit with a timeline that Dan and Pat have agreed to. We had everything timely for the audit, and you know, they're trying to do their day-to-day jobs, and we've got 3 to 5 people bugging them while we're here doing field work, but they got all the information to us very timely, and the audit went very efficiently. So first of all, I want to thank Dan and his staff and Pat and his staff for all the hard work they do to help accomplish this. The financial statements, we are giving you a clean or unmodified opinion on your financial statements. So that means as they are presented, we feel they're materially correct. We don't audit 100% of the transactions, but we do assess what we consider materiality, and we feel that these are within those standards. In fact, as the trial balance was presented to us at the start of the audit, we proposed no audit adjustments this year. So that means that the monthly financial information that you get from Dan and Pat is something you can rely on. There is, of course, closing entries that have to happen at the end of the year, but all those were recorded before we started our audit. So that's about as clean, unmodified opinion as you can get from an auditor. So we do this audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, but we also do it in accordance with government auditing standards, which the difference is for government auditing standards, we not only audit the numbers, but we also need to look at your internal controls of how you process transactions and process information through the financial statements. And we don't necessarily test those internal controls, and we do not give an opinion on them, but we would be required to let you know as governance if we felt there was any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And I'm happy to report that we had no findings of internal controls deficiencies this year. So that's very good. Government auditing standards also require that we test compliance with laws and regulations that could have a direct and material effect on your financial statements. So for school districts, that would be budget laws, bond covenants, a lot of the state compliance requirements over extracurricular and A and B, and you know, cash and debt. We're fortunate that the state of Montana puts out a compliance supplement, so we're not having to dig out what all those compliance requirements might be. And we don't give an opinion on compliance. We don't say in our opinion, but we would report any material instances of non-compliance that we run across. And I'm happy again to report that we had no instances of non-compliance. We also do the audit in accordance with uniform guidance requirements, which are anytime you receive federal grants over $750,000, you're required to have a single audit or an audit in accordance with uniform guidance. And for that, we take your schedule of federal expenditures, which you guys had about $8.4 million of federal expenditures last year. And we do a risk assessment to determine which ones of those programs we consider major programs. This year, your major programs were the Child Nutrition Cluster and the Special Education Cluster. And for those major programs, we are required to test the internal controls that are in place. So in other words, what procedures and controls have you put in process in order to make sure you comply with those federal laws? And we test those controls and procedures. And again, we would report any instances of non-compliance, and we had none. We also test the compliance with those major programs. So we test that you complied with all the federal regulations, and we do give an opinion on that compliance, and I'm happy to report that we're giving an unmodified, clean opinion on your compliance with the federal requirements. The federal award schedule is on page 87. If you go to dig into the report, those two audit reports that I just went over on the back pages. One thing I want to point out in the financial statements is if you read any part of it, I would recommend you read the management's discussion and analysis. That's at the very front of the financial statements. And it's supposed to be a little user-friendly, easier to read, and Dan writes it. So it gives you some comparisons from this year to the prior year and what changed and what the future might look like for this district. And I think has some really good information that is a good piece to read in the financial statements. There was one new footnote in the financial statements this year, and that was because you adopted GASB 77, which is the tax abatement disclosure GASB. And basically, it's just disclosures if the district has been affected by any tax abatements that the county has implemented or adopted. And so there's just a couple paragraph footnote in there, and you guys have not been affected by, dollar amount wise by any tax abatements in the county. The next on the agenda is the financial trends, which is stapled to that agenda. And this is some benchmarking that we do for you guys, where we do 5 years worth of information for the district, and then we also do some information on a few other of the Class AA schools, including Bozeman, Billings, and Great Falls. We used to have Helena and Kalispell on there, but they're late getting their financial statements out, or at least published to their website, and we don't do those two audits. So since it was prior information, I just removed it from the schedule. And one thing when I was looking at this, preparing, that I think I'll do next year, or I think actually our contract is up for bid, but if you would hire us again, I promise, I think I'll do the percentages per year, so that, because I think sometimes the percentages have a little bit more meaning, than the dollar amount sometimes. So that way you can compare whether your revenues for charges of services is, during 2017 was 2% of total revenue, but was that a big change from the prior year? So I'll add that in the future. Or if you provide this to a future auditor, it's not proprietary information, so they could start doing the schedule also. But a few things to point out. If you look at the net asset section at the very top, you do have a total deficit net asset position. That hasn't changed for 3 years now because of implementing GASB 65, which was the pension liability requirement. So, for example, this year, your share of the TRS and PERS pension liability for the state of Montana is about $77 million. You'll never have to write a check for that, but unfortunately, government accounting theory says you will record your share of it, and that if you added $77 million to the $18 million deficit, you would be in a really strong position. I can say, and you guys are probably aware of this, having gone out for bonding here in the last couple of years, that the bond agents are just kind of eliminating that in their calculation. It's not affecting bond ratings at this time. Does that mean they could change that in the future? Maybe, but at this point in time, from every school district that we've worked with that has issued bonds, it hasn't reduced their bond rating at all. So. And if you compare that to some of the other schools, Bozeman has a positive net position, but Billings has a pretty large deficit, and Great Falls has an even, larger deficit if you compare size of the school districts. The fund balance then, the net asset position includes full accrual accounting, so you add in the capital assets and you reduce by the debt. Fund balance then is just your day-to-day funds, what's left in them at the end. And Unassigned, that's really where you have flexibility in what you can do with that. That's 5% of your total fund balance. Of that, the majority of it is in your general fund, and most of that would probably be your reserves left in the general fund. Your general fund balance is about $3.5 million, and that's the combined general fund between elementary and high school. Restricted fund balance is pretty significant, and most of that is in the building funds, and that's the cash left in those building funds, more or less, that hasn't been spent yet on the projects. If you look, the difference between the restricted in the fund balance and the restricted in the net assets is in the full government-wide financial statements, any capital assets, less debt, less any cash left over from debt that hasn't been, or plus any cash left over, then is recorded as that investment in capital assets. So basically, that cash left in the building funds moved up to that investment in capital assets at the government-wide level. Total revenue for the year, $110 million. I think it's interesting to see that really property taxes, this school district has a little bit lower, well actually it's lower than Bozeman, but about on par with Billings, and Great Falls has a low percentage of property taxes, their revenue, about 22%. Grant funding, you guys have really strong grant management, and 17% of your total revenue is from grants and contributions. In the expense side, you guys have really strong percentage of your total expenses is spent on instruction, which is really what you want to see. The higher that is, the better, I would think, although, because that is your mission. You have to instruct. But you can't do that without the support activities or the administration. But you guys are setting really, really well at that percent of instruction expenditure. The one thing I just wanted to point out, because I'm not even sure of the answer, I didn't dig into it before I came up, but you do have a little bit higher percentage spent on student transportation, and that could be because you're a large district spread over a pretty large area. Pat and Dan might even know the answer, but I can dig into that for future. Just to know how come that is a little bit higher. It's 3% for every other school, but and then interest, you guys are actually lower, considerably lower than the interest costs of Bozeman and even Billings. And Great Falls really has no debt at this point in time. But fall enrollment, you guys are right in the middle of the mix. Bozeman is smaller with about 6,700 students. Fall enrollment for you guys last year was about 8,900. And an interesting number, I think, is the cost per student. So basically, we just divide the total expenses by that A and B number, and you guys are really strong. I think probably a little bit Billings and Great Falls. There is some scales of economy, you know, with students, so them spending a little bit less per student probably is because they have a little bit higher A and B, although there's a point there where then, you know, your A and B, you're going to add teachers and support staff and everything, so. But I think that it's, if you look across, you guys have held costs fairly consistent with the substantial growth in A and B that you've had, so you've done a good job of utilizing the dollars that you've got. And then your reserves, cash and investments. This is your total cash, not including any clearing fund, which really is spent money, it just hasn't cleared the accounts yet, less the cash on hand for the building projects. And you know, it's gone down somewhat, but that's, you know, tight tight budgets, basically, I would say. Any questions on those numbers?
Any questions for Stephanie?
A few other things to report to you really quickly. We are required to look at significant transactions that happen throughout the year, and we noted none that were unusual or lacked appropriate authorization or documentation. In order to put the financial statement together, it does require estimates of management. The largest and most significant estimates are your incurred but unpaid claims in the insurance fund, the liability for the post-employment benefits, and then the pension liability. Any significant estimate, we are required to look at management's assumptions and how they came up with those amounts, and decide whether we agree with those assumptions, and we had no disagreements. Most of these, the incurred but unreported, is a report that we get from your third-party administrator. OPEB is an actuarial report that you pay for, and the pension liabilities, the plans themselves have an actuary that prepares that, and then the legislative auditor's office does audit those. So we're fortunate that as your auditors, we just have to verify that the amounts agree to the plan and the LAO's reports, and there's not a lot of additional work we have to do on that estimate. Again, like I reported, we had encountered no difficulties in doing the audit or working with management, and we will require a representation letter from management as soon as they've approved the financial statements that basically says they've given us all the information we've asked for, they're not hiding liabilities or assets or anything. And just to let you know, I always try to let you know of new standards coming. There is a new standard that'll be effective next year. It's GASB 75, and it's on that other post-employment benefit. It does change the accounting a little bit. Again, you'll get this information from the actuary. The accounting that changed is that changes in that liability, instead of just running through the current operation, will be run through a deferred inflow or deferred outflow and then amortized over a 5-year period, so that it doesn't affect your operating statement or your income statement as much in the year those happen. And then, of course, there's another 6 pages of disclosures that are going to be required, similar to the pension disclosures, which are about 12 pages. So, any questions?
Any questions for Stephanie? Seeing none? Sure. Oh, Diane? Or
So we're listing our net assets. Is the value of our real estate in that first number, that $32 million number?
The cost is, now we don't adjust that to fair value at all, you know, so once you buy it or build it, that goes in there, and then that's depreciated. So this is less depreciation, and then it's less any debt that you still owe that was used to buy or build those assets. So right now your bond debt is subtracted out of there also. Okay.
any other questions?
Just to make sure I understand that, so when we paid $10 for the Missoula College, that just adds $10 just to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee?
Can you explain again? I'm sorry, I think you already explained this, but I missed it. Under revenues for other sources, Missoula's is 9%, Bozeman's was 0, and Great Falls was 15. Why such a discrepancy there, and what does that represent?
You know, I think it's an error on Bozeman. I did notice that. I did not explain that. I hoped no one would see that. What that mostly is your county distribution for retirement. And because there's not a category here for county revenue, but I think Bozeman's, I must have accidentally included that in the state funding. I'll verify that and send Pat or Dan an updated one of these if you want a corrected one, just so you have it. I'm fairly certain that, I know that's what's in your guys' other sources. There's a little bit of investment income in there also, and then a tiny bit of miscellaneous revenue, but the majority of that is your county distribution revenue. And I think I just messed up on the Bozeman side.
Hi, thanks. You do a great job of explaining very dense stuff, so thank you very much for that, by the way. When it says grants, we're aware, obviously, of certain foundation grants and things like that, but this is primarily things like title.
Yeah, well, you know, 8.5 million of it is federal grants.
Right.
Which is passed through the state, most of it is passed through the State Office of Public Instruction. No, the title, all that would be in that state funding.
That's all under state funding?
That's all under state funding,
Okay.
so.
And then charge for services?
That would be your school food charges, some tuition and fees.
Fees and things, okay.
Yeah.
Out of state, I mean, out of district
Yes,
attendance
that
and
would
that
go
sort of
through
thing?
there also, yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions? And then Superintendent Thane had a comment, and I didn't know if Dan or Pat had anything else to add as well.
Well, I would just like to reference that we talk a great deal about being good stewards of the public resources. And I always look forward actually to this presentation because I think it validates the work that maybe many of us take for granted. And I just want to acknowledge Dan and Pat and all the business service individuals up and down the hall. They do a great job of attending not only to the accounting practices that are important, but all the federal regulations and all the attendant details that are so necessary in order for us to ensure the public that we do manage the funds well. And so I'm really pleased again with the audit report. I do think it reflects a high degree of professionalism on the part of staff, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with such high-quality individuals.
I would agree with you, Superintendent Thane. You know, Pat and Dan will call me throughout the year every once in a while when something's changed and they just want to make sure they have the right processes in place so that they have good, strong controls and procedures, and, or, you know, that they're accounting for something appropriately. And that speaks that they really do want to make sure it's done correctly. And it does, it's from, you know, from staff on up to Dan and Pat, so it's the whole district as a whole really runs into this, so.
And now we'll move out of the questions part, and there is recommendation that the trustees accept the audit report as presented for fiscal year 2017. Is there a motion to accept the audit report? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Decker. Now it's time for board discussion. Any board discussion? I mean, one more of a thank you, but I know because of, I think it's legal deadlines, that the second meeting in March would have given everyone a little more time to prepare this, but because of when spring break fell this year, it meant that Dan and Pat and Anderson Zermulin's team, you know, had to kind of move everything back by 2 weeks in order to make sure we met that legal deadline. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for that as well. To explain why the report's online and we didn't print it out is because of the fact that we lost an opportunity at the end of the month to do it because of when spring break. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody on this endeavor to make sure that it was done properly and efficiently, and so thanks for that. And then any public comment or any other board comment? Seeing, yeah, sure. Trustee.
Okay, I just want to add another appreciation that I don't imagine that this comparison to the other districts is like strictly necessary as part of this audit report, but it's extremely appreciated by me. And, you know, I know for me, this is not my background, and I very much appreciate having this information. You've made it available the last couple of years, and just to see that we're in line with other districts is super helpful information for us as a board. Thank you.
Yes, and I actually enjoy putting it together. I guess a question, if I can, would you like me to include those other two school districts even though it's a prior year's information? So I can
That's-
add that back.
That's not on our agenda, so we can't decide that tonight, but why don't you discuss that with
Okay.
Superintendent Thane and Dan and Pat, and then I think that they could make a recommendation as to how to do that. So, and seeing no other comments, then there is a motion on the table to accept the audit report as presented for fiscal year 2017. All trustees in favor of accepting the report, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Thank you again, Stephanie, and your team at Anderson-Zermulin. Then we move on to number 2, to authorize the engagement of WeConnect and Blackfoot for internal wiring. It's an elementary action item because this is for wiring that's going to go on at Jeanette Rankin, Russell Elementary, and Washington Middle School. So Ray, do you want to explain how the process worked and how we ended up with having a recommendation that we engage WeConnect and Blackfoot?
Sure. Good evening. So the IT department sought permission to request proposals for wiring back in January, and we did so for Jeanette Rankin, Russell, and Washington Middle School. 3 proposals were submitted for Jeanette Rankin and 2 each for Russell and Washington. These proposals were scored by a committee of 5 IT department members and business services, a business service member as well. And the rubric for scoring was published in the original RFP in accordance with the E-rate rules. Items on that rubric included equipment warranty, response times, labor warranty, related experience, references, and of course, price. And based upon scoring, the committee is recommending that we engage with services from WeConnect for Jeanette Rankin Elementary with a bid of $98,119.26. Russell Elementary for WeConnect as well for $94,848.03. And then Blackfoot for Washington Middle School with a bid of $133,468.73. And I would just like to add on to that, I want to thank, and I think he just stepped out of the room, but Dan Parrish was a member of that committee, as well as Jacob Mandel, Morris Austin, Brian Conniff, and then WeConnect is here tonight as well.
Any questions for Ray before I consider a motion? Trustee Smith and Trustee Lorenzen, let's move up.
Thanks, Ray, appreciate that. I just was wondering if there was, I noticed that we do this for each building, is there a reason that we didn't put them together? Would there have been any economy of scale to do that, or do we have any?
So for E-rate purposes, I do believe we have to bid them individually because we're seeking a percent of those service, a percent back for
All right, that's what.
So for E-rate rules, it's very specific and strict.
Okay, thanks.
So I know you're new, so you might be able to tell us, are you concerned that we only got 2 and 3 responses? Is this what you might have seen in a bigger market, or do you feel our market is too small?
I actually don't think it's too small. So we did include a pre-proposal conference, and six vendors came to that pre-proposal conference, and I'm sorry I omitted that from my narrative. And then from that, we got 3 people that bid. We do ask for a specific product and for some specific certifications, which gives us a 25-year product and equipment warranty, and then a labor warranty as well. So that could be deterring, but we do accept substitutions if they can show that they also give that same warranty and then have those similar certifications.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith? Yeah.
One quick final question. I'm pretty sure Blackfoot is obviously a local business. Is WeConnect also a local
They
business?
certainly are.
Both are. Great.
Both are, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, are the trustees okay with, elementary trustees okay with combining them since it's going to WeConnect and Blackfoot, or do you want to separate them out because there's 2 different bidders? Otherwise, the proposal is that the trustees authorize the engagement of WeConnect for services associated with the wiring at Russell and Jeanette Rankin, and with Blackfoot for the internal wiring for Washington Middle School. So everyone's okay with a single motion? So is there a motion to authorize the engagement of these individual businesses for the identified wiring at the identified schools? Moved by trustee Smith and seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Then thank you for being here. Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of authorizing the engagement of WeConnect in connection with Russell and Jeanette Rankin and with Blackfoot in connection with Washington Middle School, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all elementary trustees present. Thank you very much for being here, and then we'll move on to a parallel request concerning the engagement of WeConnect for the internal wiring at Willard. And so, is there anything to add about the process other than it might be different people involved or different processing information?
So I would just say that 3 proposals were submitted for Willard, and it was the same scoring committee, same process, same everything.
Any questions for Ray, Ms. Cooper, about this? Seeing none, then is there a motion to authorize the engagement of WeConnect for services associated with the wiring at Willard Alternative High School? Moved by trustee Wake and seconded by trustee Duggar. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of authorizing the engagement of WeConnect for the services associated with the internal wiring at Willard Alternative High School program, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present, and I should have mentioned earlier, trustee Wake is here now as well. Thank you. Yes.
Our voting on item 2 for the 3 elementaries probably should have been an elementary only vote?
That's what we did.
Did we?
Yeah. All of the rest of us kept our hands down. We, yes, I made sure. Any other clarifications? And so we've had a vote, right? Okay, so then we do move on to item number 4, and thank you from WeConnect folks for being here. Item number 4 is to approve the memorandum of understanding entered into by MCPS and Partnership Health Center Incorporated, and this is an elementary item since this is adjacent to Lowell School. So Superintendent Thay, do you want to explain what's?
Thank you. Just by way of brief background, we have a contract with Partnership Health Center Incorporated to operate the health clinic that's referred to as the Lowell Health Clinic. And its primary intent was to serve the students and families of Lowell Elementary School. We determined some time ago to expand that coverage to also include students from the Willard Alternative High School program. However, it hasn't had great utilization from that demographic, I think simply because of proximity and transportation issues. Over the course of the last year, the hours that the health clinic has been able to function have become severely restricted. We have found that the enrollment at Lowell Elementary and the families associated with Lowell Elementary are not driving enough traffic, quite honestly, to the health clinic, to the point where the health clinic has been operating at a deficit of approximately $10,000 a month. And that's certainly not a sustainable model. There was an opportunity then to review the model and determine if we could expand service in the north and west side primarily, and create a situation where the Lowell Health Clinic would be viable. Right now, the hours have been reduced to Wednesday service hours only, and of course, health needs don't always occur on Wednesdays. So the discussions that we've had with Partnership Health would be to recognize a couple things. Number one, their primary service delivery is rendered through the old Creamery building, which is the home base for Partnership Health. And they essentially have exceeded their capacity in that facility. What we've discussed in terms of this MOU is broadening the service delivery at the Lowell Clinic. And the way that would largely be done is service providers who maintain hours at the Partnership Creamery building would maintain some of their hours at the Lowell Clinic, so that established patients would report on certain days to the Lowell Clinic if they had appointments with those particular providers. We would also look to expand services at the Lowell Clinic to include such things as prenatal care and pediatric care, early childhood care primarily, which both have a natural tie-in and ultimately would result in serving many of those students that would be later served in the school district. The original contract that was drafted, however, limited the service to those students and families associated with Lowell School. So I think the key element in the Memorandum of Understanding, which is on page 28 in the packet, is about 3/4 of the way down the page, and it's number 1, essentially. And what we're proposing is for a limited time and subject to the terms of this particular MOU, the parties, being Partnership Health Clinic and Missoula County Public Schools, would agree to waive the provision of the lease restricting delivery of healthcare services at the Lowell Health Clinic. So the net effect would be that we could expand to serve other clients in the Lowell Health Clinic. A couple things that are really important to note. Number one, the Lowell students would still be first priority. And given that we would have other clients of the health clinic utilizing that facility, what we would do is the Lowell students would be escorted by an adult to the clinic. They would actually enter through the back door with no waiting, would receive immediate service. Then the adult would escort them back out the back door to Lowell School. So there would be no mixing with general population in waiting rooms or anything of that nature, and we would have adult supervision at all times. The term of the MOU as it's proposed is for 1 year presently. Partnership Health Clinic is certainly interested in an extended period of time. We felt it important to have an opportunity to evaluate the program should we find the direction of the board to support this MOU. You'll note that the last provision that's identified in the MOU also states that the MOU can be terminated by either party upon 60 days written notice. We felt it important to include a couple safeguards as we navigate this because it is a significant change for the clinic. So with that background, certainly would ask the trustees to entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between Missoula County Public Schools and Partnership Health Clinic.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Thane before I entertain a motion? Trustee Smith?
Hi, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And I know you touched on this. I think this is a good solution to the situation that we have. One of the questions I have is regarding, you had mentioned that the, basically that the Partnership Health Clinic's not being utilized to its capacity. Is part of that because the students at Lowell are using it less than we anticipated? And if so, are we doing enough to make sure that they are getting everything that is available to them?
An excellent question, and we actually attended a Lowell PTO meeting recently, along with representatives from Partnership Health, discussed that very topic, making sure that we have a robust referral process, making sure that families understand the services that are available. So I do think there is room for better outreach. Lowell is also currently the school with our lowest enrollment, and as we see the north side continue to grow and revitalize, we expect that to change. There is an opportunity here, I think, to also conceive of other services that might be rendered at the Lowell Clinic, and there's an interest on the part of Partnership Health in engaging in some particular conversation about how we might seek to engage students that attend other schools within our districts and have that become a primary service delivery location for them and for their families, and really tailoring it again to the education side of the house. And I think there's definitely potential there. It is restricted in the current contract, but under the MOU, that restriction would be lifted, and I think there's capacity for us to consider that. I think also if we can increase participation, there's also the prospect that we could expand hours. And right now it's just typical business hours. So if you're a Willard student or a student who lives elsewhere in the community, it's difficult to get there during regular school hours. So again, Partnership Health's open to creative solutions, to recruitment. I could even foresee us working to recruit our employees to utilize the health clinic in some way, shape, or form. So lots of possibilities.
Any other questions? Trustee Newbold?
I have two questions, if that's okay. Mark, you touched on communication with the Lowell community, which was one of my questions. And can you share what the thoughts and sentiments were from the Lowell administration and community with regard to this proposal? And then secondly, just out of curiosity, are you familiar with why it was restricted to just Lowell students at the beginning?
I'll answer the second question first. The original intent was simply to have a school-based clinic. In many communities, you would find that clinic located actually in the physical school. They pursued a grant and built the facility on the site with the primary recognition that we had a school that served a particular neighborhood. It was a neighborhood where there was a high level of poverty, and that it would be a great place to make an initial inroad into such a service delivery model. Again, I think unfortunately we found that the enrollment and the use hasn't sustained it at this point in time. I lost track of your other question.
The Lowell community's thoughts on the proposal?
The response was generally positive at the meeting. I think there's a recognition that it's a valuable asset in the community, and people want to find it to be a viable service alternative. There did not seem to be any significant concerns with expanding the operation. There were questions certainly about the referral process, about making sure that we're maximizing the opportunity for the Lowell families and staff and students. But generally, people are thankful that it's available, would like to see the hours expanded, and would like to see a model in place that allows the clinic to be viable.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
There's one question regarding the physical nature of the building. We own the land, they own the building, is that correct?
The term of the contract, which I believe is a 20-year contract, says that at the end of those 20 years, they would be obligated to restore the land to its previous state, which would imply that they would either move or remove the building. Obviously, that would be open to conversation 20 years down the road, which may be the function of another board and another superintendent.
Maybe for sure. Any other trustee questions? I guess I have two. One, is there any sense of how the losses might have been impacted by the fact that Lowell families, Lowell wasn't occupied last year, so is this a blip? But or was it underutilized even before the rebuild of Lowell?
I think yes to both. I think it was underutilized previously, but I do think being off-site for a year meant that it was not as convenient, certainly. And so I think that, again, comes back to the outreach, making sure the parents in particular in that community know the full range of options that are available, from the traditional physical health, mental health, dental health, all available at the clinic.
And one more question. Remind me why the county commissioners have to sign this agreement.
Thank you. Yes, the county commissioners actually have oversight of the partnership health. So that's why the county commissioners are the signatories.
Thanks. Any other questions then? Seeing none, then it's an elementary action item. Is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding amendments it's the revision to the memorandum of understanding changing certain provisions entered into by MCPS and Partnership Health Center as have been discussed here. Moved by Trustee Decker. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Newbold. Is there any discussion? Trustee Decker.
Thanks. I wasn't able to be at that particular Lowell PTO meeting, but I have talked to many Lowell parents and PTA members since then who thought the meeting was great. They were very, very appreciative of the thought that had gone into thinking of ways to make the clinic a more valuable part of the community, and there's a lot of hope that that will happen. Particularly, I have to say, around the idea of establishing prenatal and early childhood services, because once you have a doctor, you're going to tend to keep using that doctor as your kid gets older. And so if you're using the doctor already that's right on site, once your kid is in the school, it just makes sense to continue using that service. So that seems like a really logical progression to folks. And also, people have been excited about the idea, I will say, of the building being occupied more of the time because of the benefits to safety and security on the playground of having that building have a regular, consistent occupation and presence. So.
Any other trustee comments? Trustee Smith?
Well, I just want to sort of echo what Grace said. I think this is a tremendous asset that if we don't take a measure to make sure that we don't lose it for something that can be fixed, that we're not really doing the service to that population. The only thing I want to make sure that, and I think that a healthier population is going to lead to better, happier, smarter, more engaged students and staff. I just hope that as we move down the road and as this continues, and I hope that it becomes a nice long relationship with the partnership. I don't want, I just hope we don't lose any, I hope that people don't end up becoming part of partnership, you know, as opposed to doing, you know, our primary functions. And it doesn't sound like that's even a logical fear, because partnership seems to be well-staffed and certainly able to do it. But when we're talking about like moving the kids over and stuff, and if, I don't know if we have to means hiring extra people to make sure as it gets used more, you know, or how we staff that, but it's something just to keep an eye on, I think, in the future.
Any other board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of approving the memorandum of understanding as was presented, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all elementary trustees. Then we move on to item number 5, which is something we see at least once a year, if not more. So Pat, if you want to remind us what happens in the bid.
You bet. So we operate a warehouse, as you all know, and the warehouse distributes supplies to the schools. Those supplies include office supplies and also O&M custodial type supplies. So we're requesting permission here to bid those products, and then we'll accommodate the purchases through the warehouse office, or through the warehouse.
Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to grant permission to bid the warehouse supplies? Moved by trustee Wake, seconded by trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of granting permission to the district to bid the warehouse supplies, please indicate by raising your hand. And okay, just making sure it's up. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Thank you. Then we move on to item number 6, which is the formal approval of the opening of Jeanette Rankin Elementary, which is supported by Resolution 2018-11E in our packet. It's an elementary action item. And Pat, if you want to explain that this is basically pursuant to a state statute that the district has to approve the opening of the school?
You bet, and that's exactly right. So there's a statute that's referenced in the background information that requires for this opening of a new school the following of certain steps. And one of those steps is a resolution by the Board of Trustees, and that resolution is on page 30. It essentially reflects the approval by the trustees to open Jeanette Rankin as an elementary school. And so this is one of the steps that also includes some information filed with the county superintendent and a petition that we'll put together and to be compliant.
Any questions for Pat? I just have one. So as I understand it, in part, the reason, because it really is a replacement school, is that each school with its unique name has a unique identifying number that's assigned by OPI or by the state, and therefore that's why it's important to identify this as a new school?
That's correct. So we contacted OPI, and in anticipation of this resolution, they've issued us an ID number unique to that school. I think the other rationale is they may have got into some legal issues in the past with respect to the identification of some schools and not enough A and B at various districts. It was a little vague when I was trying to get the explanation for the statute, but clearly we've gone far down the path of opening the school.
Based on my question, any other questions?
Does this precipitate any other strange things happening? Like, well, I mean, I know that a lot of teachers have contracts that are annual, but principals, I mean, like how it works for staffing the new school, people who would roll over versus, like, how does that kind of work? Is there wrinkles that people might not be familiar with that process?
I don't think so, because they're, and you mentioned the contracts we have, which are contracts between the district and the employee and not a specific building. It's an interesting question, but I don't think that from a contractual standpoint that there'd be an issue. Dave might have input relative to placement or location, but it's a replacement school, so I think we're good.
Staff will move.
Any other questions based on those questions? Trustee Wade?
Is there in the statute anything that says that the school can't be named by another school?
There isn't, like a,
The only reason I'm asking is because I know that Kalispell named their elementary school Rankin Elementary School.
Right.
And I didn't want to get into any kind of conflict here.
Seeing no other questions, is there a motion by an elementary trustee to adopt the attached resolution 2018-11E, identifying next year as the contemplated opening of the new Jeanette Rankin Elementary School? Moved by trustee Kendall, seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? Kendall and seconded by Newbold. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. Trustee Decker?
It strikes me that with the formal opening of Jeanette Rankin, there also is at some point going to be a formal closing of Cold Springs. And I just want to be sensitive to that as a board, that there are people in the community who will see that as a sad thing, even while the opening of Jeanette Rankin is an exciting thing. And so I know even when Lowell and Franklin's buildings were undergoing big change, there were some community efforts to kind of mark that and celebrate it and reach out in some way. And so I would hope that that's happening in the Cold Springs community, and that the board will be apprised of that, and that we can publicize that appropriately so that people aren't shocked and blindsided by the formal closure, which is also coming.
Any other board comments? Any public comment? Public comment, then all elementary trustees in favor of adopting the attached resolution 2018-11E, identifying next year as the contemplated opening of the new Jeanette Rankin Elementary School, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all elementary trustees present.
May I offer one quick clarifying comment?
Sure.
And I apologize, I recognize this is outside the agenda, but I think it's appropriate to notice the trustees at this point in time that we have provided notice to the current Cold Springs staff as well as to the parent community that Jeanette Rankin Elementary will not open for the beginning of the school year. It's a little bit behind in terms of construction schedule. We anticipate completion around the 1st of October, and we'll contemplate a fall move. We'll be collaborating with staff and administration at Cold Springs to determine just exactly how we'll accomplish that and the timeline for accomplishing that. But I would anticipate it being late October to early November of 2018 that we would actually physically move into the new facility.
Thanks for that clarification, and now we'll move on to number 7, which is an elementary action item, and it's the consideration and adoption of Resolution 2018-10E, estimating changes in the revenue mills for certain funds. So Pat, I know that it looks like there are, within the background information, there are some comparisons for all the different levies, mills, and tax impacts on different funds. So if you want to walk us through what that's about, and then how to tie that in with the recommendation that the trustees, elementary trustees, approve the resolution that is in the packet.
All right, thank you. And if you'll recall, this was first introduced last year and during the 2017 regular session of the legislature, and they gave us until April, or gave the board until April to approve the resolution and to publish the resolution. The statute essentially provides that for permissive levies, that the estimates will be made by the board and will be published by the board by the end of March. So those estimates were tied specifically to funds that include a permissive levy, and they are the transportation, tuition, adult ed, and building reserve fund. What we did this year as compared to last year is we incorporated all of our funds, because there is a permissive part of the general fund, and there's a voted part of the general fund. And so what you see on page 31 for the elementary is a look at our current year levies and mills, their relative change by fund. And again, these are estimates. When we adopt budgets in August, we're right now at least putting on notice to the public that we have these funds, and we're estimating various changes in our permissive levies. These estimates are also, or I should say the tax estimates, are based upon last year's taxable valuation, which we won't know until August. So those numbers are likely low, as we've seen pretty regular increases in tax valuations. On the elementary side, worth noting here is within the general fund, we're anticipating and recommending a voted over base levy of $305,000. And then within the base budget of our general fund budget, we're also seeing a reduction in the local levy of about $617,000. Again, this is based upon our calculations at this point in time. Also notable under the building reserve piece, another component of Senate Bill 307 is the flexibility for boards to approve a permissive building reserve levy for maintenance projects, which then becomes specifically identified within the resolution, which we have here underneath the graph. You'll see two projects that we've identified to be used with the permissive component of this building reserve. One is the abatement work at Missoula College. That would be cost shared with the high school. And the second would be roof replacement of the south building at the former Missoula College. And so with these changes to the various various funds that you will ultimately approve, you can see the change in mills that we're estimating here at 3.5, as well as the estimated tax impact. And here on a $100,000 home, it's $4.77, and on a $200,000 home, it's $9.54. Annually, thank you. So that's the estimated annual tax impact. And so it's for all of our funds for which we adopt budgets. The other component of the resolution, if you look at the last paragraph, is just simply a reference to the fact that the taxable valuation is based upon prior year taxable valuation, and that taxable valuation, if it increases as expected, will change the mills and taxpayer costs. So I think that pretty much incorporates all of the statutory requirements of the resolution.
Any questions for Pat? Trustee Lorenzen?
So I guess we have a voted amount, we already decided we're going to vote, we're going to run an election, or we have not decided that yet?
That's, you haven't, and so as Mark mentioned earlier, the deadline to certify ballots is April 5th. But by putting this within this resolution, we're recommending that we run a voted levy. And this is part of our estimates for the board. And so, I guess the two are linked in a way, because it's within this resolution, which would be administration's recommendation. And obviously, if it's the board's pleasure not to run the voted levy, then you wouldn't want to include that in the resolution. But that's certainly our recommendation.
So right now, we're running 7.7 million of voted levy. We would, if we voted another 0.3 million, we would have 8 million in perpetuity, because we would, what we vote this year becomes permanent. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to turn that into a question, because I have a different question. If we decide not to run the general fund voted levy, will the administration simply increase the amount of these permissive levies in other categories?
Yeah, and they're not going to solve for the general fund. So the general fund, which I can plug up here on the screen, with that voted levy, we are down about 140,000. So if we pass the voted levy, we still have to account for about $140,000 on the elementary side. And those are operating costs that exist within the voted levy. An increase in any of the other permissive levies would not solve for our general fund operating costs. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
So I do have a question, because it's going to probably apply to the next one as well. So what is the impact of Resolution 2018-10E, where the introductory language indicates that the district needs to provide notice of an intent to increase non-voted levies? And so Diane was just asking about voted levies. So I'm just trying to figure out the connection between this resolution and what impact this resolution would have on voted and permissive, or voted and permissive levies.
So the impact of the resolution is, and I think what you're asking about is the breadth of which, of the resolution, is really, if we're going to publish the resolution, it's trying to provide our taxpayers with a full picture of what we'll be adopting, or you'll be adopting in August. If we reflect only the permissive levy resolutions that are part of the statute, what we're missing is the rest of the picture. And so we're saying that, in the interest of fully disclosing our estimates across the board of all of our adopted funds, and with the exception of the retirement fund, you'll adopt that as well, but that's a county-wide levy, and that's not possible for us to reflect in this document. But other than that, all of our district funds are represented here, and so when we publish this along with the other districts in our area, we're showing and demonstrating to the community what we anticipate in August will be our change in mills and change in levies. And adding to the mix, the general fund is really a way to communicate fully that tax impact and that levy changes, as well as the ones for tuition, transportation, and adult ed, and building reserve.
And I think Pat stated it well. I just want to reemphasize the point that the intent here of the statute was to just notify the public of our intent to increase any permissive levies. In the interest of being fully transparent, we felt that it was important to demonstrate all revenue sources and the impact they would have on the local taxpayer, whether they're voted or permissive levies. So Pat and I had discussion, and we exceed technically the requirements of statute by presenting it in this fashion, but we felt it important for the trustees and the public to have a comprehensive view of the tax picture.
Trustee Wake?
Okay, this may be a foolish question. You're looking, the way I look at this is you've given us an overall picture of what we need to have to keep functioning with the voted and the permissive levies all lumped together in one thing, which would come down to $9, whatever you said, a year, if they passed all the voted levies and the permissive levies. Is that right?
That's right.
So what you're saying is that in the grand scheme of things, this is how much money we need. This is what we need, this is how we've divided it out between voted and permissive levies, and it's gonna cost, with this money that you're saying here, $9.20 a year to do this.
The increase would be
Right. So I guess am I not seeing the picture right?
No, that's correct. And the permissive levies are not voted. They're levies that are really board approved, and they're board approved in August for the transportation fund, for the tuition fund, for the adult education fund, that's when they're formally approved. The Senate Bill 307 added to the mix the permissive part of the building reserve levy. So what you said is correct. You have the voted piece, and then you have the permissive piece. So we're saying that that come August, we're going to recommend to the board permissive levy increases in these areas, the full amount of which we're estimating right now, because we're not going to know until August exactly the amount. But then we're also adding to the mix what would be included as a voted levy, and that's only part of the general fund.
So in May, we'd have to vote on what we needed to vote on as part of this package right here.
Just the general fund.
Right. So, and then in August, we would lump them all together, or do we need another vote again?
No vote, because the voted piece isn't your vote, but the taxpayer's vote.
So it's only the general fund we'd have to vote on in May.
That's right.
So then if it passes, then it would go and be lumped together with our budget analysis at the end of August.
That's right, your budget adoption, which would include permissive levies.
Okay.
That's right.
I would direct your attention to the third line above the grand total in the box on page 31, and note that debt service is included there, and that is the debt service on the bonds, and that's following the sale of all bonds. So the $9.43 increase that's represented there is the cost to service the bonds. So again, part of the reason for the tax increase is the remainder of the bonds have come on in terms of debt service.
Trustee Smith?
Pat, can you explain a little bit? I may have missed it when you went down through them, but on the general permissive levy, the change in mills is that it went down 5.31 mills. And is that, I mean, I guess what I want to make sure that I understand is Trustee Lorenzo just mentioned things being in perpetuity, but this appears to be a decrease from something that is well, not in perpetuity, but in place, I should say. So can you explain how that?
Yeah, and I should address that, because the way the statute reads is that the amount that you can adopt as an over base levy, or from base budget to max budget, is the highest amount that's approved by voters within the last 5 years. So it's conceivable, and it has happened with our district, that we've had approved levies that have fallen away, have fallen off. And so it's not entirely in perpetuity because you have a 5-year period. So where that comes into play is in an environment of increasing enrollment, your base budget's going to grow, and it can grow faster than will justify the use of over base approved levies. And I got a little bit of a graph. Maybe I'd pop it up there if that's all right.
We love graphs. I do.
while Pat's putting the graph up, if I could just reference back to the audit report, you'll note that we've had, again, another increase in A and B. And I referenced this in a presentation at City Club yesterday. Since the 2011-12 school year, the elementary district enrollment has increased by 611 students. That's essentially a full elementary school's worth of enrollment increase. That's a good problem to have, of course, because it does represent growth for the Missoula community, but it also means additional expense for the school district.
So, sorry. Is it okay if I sit over here? So, all this graph reflects is over years, the relative change in the base budget versus the over base budget. And by and large, what Diane is saying is going to be correct, which is that the over base levy will grow as we vote that levy. And to the extent we don't vote that levy, like we haven't in the high school, and this doesn't have the years, but it stayed static the last 2 years, and if we had a few years prior to that, there's periods of time where it's less. And the reason it's less is we didn't have an over-base levy, but our base budget was growing. And the base budget represents the portion of the budget that we have to adopt as a board. You guys have to adopt that amount. The over-base carries you to the max budget. The base budget levies, if you look at the bottom, and this is the high school now, in 17 it was 4,069,000. Last year's 4.9 million, then it went to 4.9 million, then it's dropping back to 4.3 million. Those base levies are a reflection of the school funding formula and some of the changes the legislature put in place, which involved dumping the school block grants. So last year, you'll see the natural resource development payment, the state block grants, they went away entirely. Guaranteed tax base, which you'll see third line from the top, this year is going up significantly by 17%. We are estimating 12%. This is reflective of our relative tax valuation to a state average. And so what it's saying is that among districts that have a certain amount of A and B and a certain tax value, that ratio, if that's below the state ratio, then we're gonna get more GTB, which we got. And what that does directly is reduce our base levy, which here on the high school, the high school went down by 655,000. The elementary, similarly, the base levy went down by 617,000 on the elementary side. So when we look at the base budget, it's going to change based upon enrollment, the changes the legislature makes to inflationary increases to the school funding formula, and any legislative changes which has happened. So analyzing how that's changed over time will definitely show the base budget's fluctuating. It'll also show, if we carry this graph out with enough history, that the over base levy, by and large, Diane's right, it's going to stay static, but it doesn't always stay static when you have significant bumps in enrollment or changes in the school funding formula. And I think that isn't totally demonstrated here, but I can sort of guess back, certainly on the high school, when we had pretty good increases in our budgets with no levies. So the red graph indicates where our budgets have increased. The yellow is where there's been a voted levy. In 2011, we voted a $710,000 over base budget to increase our levies by 41,000. After that year, we didn't use that levy, so or very little of it. So that levy essentially went away, that $710,000 that was approved in 2011. We used a little bit in 2016 when we had that significant bump in enrollment. We didn't do an over base vote, but we used what hadn't been used from 2011 that had been authorized or approved. And that's that yellow graph in 2011, if you can see it. But then in 2017, 5 years had transpired, so that one, part of that one went away. And so that's part of the school funding formula, is that it's the highest over base to the extent it's been used within 5 years. So it's the highest over base voted levy to the extent it's been used. So we used 5.7 in 17, we used 5.7 million in 18. If we go up based upon a voted levy, we'd jump up to 5.94. It's growing, it's doing exactly what Diane is saying, and then it stays intact. If in 20 or 21, they have funding changes in the formula, or if we see some of this enrollment come into the high school, that base budget will grow, and it may grow enough to the point where we don't use all of the overbase levy. And that's sort of what you see, especially in the high school. We don't have, in this period of time, we had three voted levies. One was $52,000. One was $27,000. So, you know, it's been part of the practice that this is part of the school funding formula, and if we're going to sort of meet our obligations, this is what we've had to do, is we've had to go to the voters with an overbase levy, and that's part of what school districts have in as part of their funding. It's not that we vote to increase mills to meet this threshold. It's that part of the funding is a voted levy. That's part of the deal to get to meet our budgets. So that's part of the program.
So when you say voted levy, this is the general fund that you're saying that we're voting on here, which would be on here for 5 years. And is that correct?
It would be on here, as Diane said, it would be on there permanently if we continue to use it year after year. If there's any stretch of time where we didn't use what's been approved, then that portion would go off the table. And so I think if we look back historically, we'll see the elementary, which is growing, and as we're approving, or the voters are approving over base levies, and it's growing that maximum budget. And we see that here, not here, but here. So it's in a growth mode, and so that the overbase levy is doing exactly what Diane's saying, is that it's adding to the overbase, adding, not reducing. On the high school side, there's this period of flat budgets where we approved it in 1 year in May of 2011, and we didn't use it again until May of 2016. And then in 2017, after the 5th year, part of the $710,000 levy went away. And I know it went away. And so if you look at the first calculation of base budget, if it grows to a certain point, that's that line here, the 31.4 million in the elementary, then it's possible, which has happened in the elementary, not this year and not last year, but the 2 previous years, we haven't run over base levies. There's been opportunities to run them, but we haven't, so the levy has stayed, the approved over base levy has stayed static those 2 years. They didn't decrease, but it stayed static, and it stayed intact. And had we not added it last year and this year, you could conceivably have that situation where it would also go away, or part of it would. But by and large, it's intact.
So eventually this is going to catch up on the high school too.
It will, yeah. So the high school, especially, you know, now that we're in the mode of going to the voters, asking for an overbase levy, we're on the mode of adding and growing the budget is what we're at. And whereas for a good stretch of time, we were in survival mode in the high school. Because those budgetary increases, you can't see the numbers between the columns, but those are flat budgets. And so when we're increasing expenditures for staffing, for contractual obligations. We're doing so during flat budgets, and fortunately passed that $710,000 operating levy in 2011. And then that carried us through essentially 1 year, and then by the time the 5 years was up, we hadn't used all of it, so that's when it went away.
When was the last time there was a voted levy?
In the high school,
And we're not being able to hear your question for the minutes.
oh, so Ann was asking the last high school voted levy, so I've got the yellow up there for this year, which obviously hasn't been decided yet, but I've included it. The last one was in 2011, that 710,000. That was the last time we ran and passed an operating levy. And then we did the 2 years prior to that, which were small, 27,000 and 52,000. And that was really during a period where we were trying to get whatever revenue we could get into the high school.
Although the resolution you're reviewing presently is the elementary resolution, if we're going to contemplate the total effect on the local taxpayer, I think it's important to note that there would actually be a reduction in the high school tax bill. So everybody that lives in our elementary district also resides in our high school district. So if you look at the two of them together, if you're a resident of both districts, the net effect on the taxpayer with both of these proposals would be an increase of $2.67 annually per $100,000 of assessment. So $5.38 on a $200,000 home annually.
Trustee Smith?
And Pat, I appreciate that explanation. I actually followed some of it. I don't think anyone understands school funding like you do, and I appreciate the way that you can handle this. So I want to make sure another part of this that somebody touched on was, and I think it was you, Pat, when those state grants went away, at least the two that you mentioned, and that affected our ability to meet that base budget. And so part of that is the reason, at least for this. I don't know what those numbers were. In trying to explain what is happening with that, if those the legislatures said, okay, you no longer get these grants, you don't get this kind of money, and you have to tell us, where you are going to get the money to do it. So what I see is us kind of trying to backfill with some general fund voted levies, and at least, like I said, for some of that. My question is this because of it's come down from legislature and everyone is dealing with this, is this kind of across the state, across the board, what districts are running into? Or is it more relative to the size of our district, or because we're at a certain growth period or something? I mean, I understand that the growth obviously affects a big amount of it, and I'm glad that we're in a growth mode for A and B and stuff like that and those things. But I guess do you know of other districts, and what are they doing?
I'm not sure of other districts, and they would be in the similar boat, though. They'd be in the similar boat from the standpoint that and you're not going to be able to see it anyway, but that last year, or this year, the year we're in right now, with the removal of the two pieces of state funding, what was backfilled was really automatic. That was the permissive levy side. So it wasn't anything that was part of the vote, and really this year it's not either, because what the legislature contemplated, and I think it was Senate Bill 647, was that we would, or the guaranteed tax base would start to correct the fact that they pulled back those block grants. And guaranteed tax base aid really is intended to be an equitable distribution of state funds. So it looks at all these communities, and it looks at their relative ratio of A and B to your tax base. And then they have this statewide ratio, and if you fall within, so it's not really A and B, but it's your base budget amount, which is A and B driven, so it's really A and B. And so if you have a community like Whitefish, which is a resort community, and they have high relative tax value to what their base budget is, I don't think they get any GTB. And so we get a significant amount of GTB because of our ratio, relative ratio. And so that's a good position for us to be in now that they're correcting what they pulled away in the past. And so that's why this year, these are really good numbers considering the fact that we just issued more bonds, considering the fact that that we're contemplating an overbase voted levy. And in both districts, these are good estimates. And again, I got to re-emphasize their estimates, but what we're seeing, and I'll take a crack at it, is if you can look at the percentages that are 3 rows from the bottom, it's showing the percentage of local taxpayer share of the general fund. I think so. Yeah. And we're getting more in line with where we were at in 2017. And that's with a voted levy, so we're still at, is that 34%?
34.26.
Okay, good eyes. And then, whoops, elementary, I think, is closer to 32. Holy cow, look at that. I think I lost it. The elementary is getting closer to 32. So my point is we historically have around 32%. So we're moving towards that 32%.
Any other questions? Trustee Decker?
So if I'm understanding correctly, the numbers that we have here include just a variety of different tax bits that all go together to make what we think of as the taxes that we pay for schools.
Yes.
And that includes, in this picture, what we're paying to service the bond,
Yes.
which means that when the voters said, yes, go get this bond to do this work, we agree that for years to come, we will be paying for this, because that's how bonds work. So, the fact that for the average taxpayer, what you just said when you did that math just now, Mark, was that when you put the elementary and the high school together, we're actually seeing an increase of $5 total after this whole round happens. That includes what the voters told us, yes, we want to pay for paying for these bonds, which we agree we're going to do over the long haul. And so the financial management that's gone into putting this together makes it so that that's the sum total increase, even considering that we are now paying for this debt that we didn't have a couple years ago when the other numbers are up. Am I right?
So what you're seeing is the change this year relative to last year. And the net impact, as you referenced, if you live in both districts, would be $5.38 annually on $200,000 of assessed property value.
Which includes the
And that
bond.
includes the debt service for the bonds.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
Just one final question that Grace made me think of. Pat, the numbers that we're seeing on the debt service seem low compared to what the bond, because I know when we asked the voters to vote on it, there was a certain number, and I thought it was 14 in the high school and something else in the other. And I'm guessing that because of the good interest rates we got and because of the work that we've done in modifying the schedules and all that stuff, and basically what we're doing is we're coming in under those initial estimates for the bond. Is that a fair statement?
Well, and we are. We're doing better. These reflect estimates, and that's a good example of where we are estimating, primarily because we won't reappropriate remaining funds until August, when we go to adopt budget. So we'll get through the entire debt service obligation of our bonds, see where we sit in terms of our cash balance. We'll reappropriate all those funds plus the new levy in order to meet our bond debt service needs. So if these are these are estimates based upon where we're going to be at, but they are estimates.
Any other questions? So I have a couple. So if we were strictly complying with the statute passed in 2017 based on, was it Bill 307? What would we see in this resolution?
Yeah, so what you would see is the transportation fund, which is for to and from school, is purely permissive levy. It's what we go to you guys in August and say, here's where we think we're gonna be at with all our routes, special need, regular, and our increased obligation to beach. This is what we see as the levy obligation. The tuition fund would be in there, and the tuition fund is the excess special ed costs. We're not increasing it for that purpose. This increase relates to tuition we also pay to the detention center. So that would be one. The adult ed has a component of permissive levy, and the building reserve has the permissive part that was added to the mix as part of the Senate Bill 307, because there's both a voted and a permissive. And on the elementary, we have 0 voted levies anymore. We had 376,000 expire, and then we had 500,000 annually expire within the last 5 years. So that part, that permissive part, we had 210 there. Presently, we're looking to increase that by 100,000 to 310 to cover those 2 pieces of work that are described below, the abatement and the roof replacement. The debt service, the technology, those were all voted levies in the past. And the debt service, the tech levy shows no increase because that is permanently in place. The debt service is not permanently in place, but it is an ongoing obligation for 20 years.
Okay, so just to follow up, there's 4 non-voted levies, 4 funds that are non-voted levies that you just identified: transportation, tuition, adult ed, and the permissive building reserve.
Yeah.
And under a recently passed law, our school district is to provide notice of an intent to increase the non-voted levies in these 4 funds for the following fiscal year. And so even though we've included more information, which I actually find more confusing than clarifying, really the notice would have been going out on those 4 topics. And the only one that is really a change is the building reserve permissive levy.
The transportation funds.
Right. Okay. So this resolution is simply meeting a statutory obligation that the school district give notice of an intent to increase these non-voted levies in 4 identified funds. The 4 identified funds are not actually identified on the form. So when the public sees this, you don't know which 4 funds are the funds that we're supposed to be giving notice about. And so to me, that's very confusing, because you don't know that this resolution is only dealing with a specific number of non-voted funds. And so is this binding on, if the board votes tonight to pass this resolution, it sounds like we're just giving notice of intent to, at some time in the future, increase the non-voted levies in the 4 funds that we've just identified that aren't clearly identified on the form.
Well, I think that the reason we listed them all is because the previous one could leave a reviewer of this resolution to the impression that we're showing you everything that's increasing, all your tax burden, because we do show the tax impact and we do show the change in mills. Then when August rolls around, it's like, oh, don't forget these 3 funds as well. Right. And that's why we're tossing those into the mix. When MTSBA has made a recommendation on this, they've recognized the fact that these are estimates, to your point about these are estimates. And if you don't know, then put a 0 there as the potential change, and then come August, maybe there is an increase. We didn't do that because we are putting estimates in there, but it is true that we are really early in the game, and so we are complying with the statute, and we're complying, but also adding an element and really that we know about. The general fund is of all of these, we know the most about that. Our A and B is done. We've calculated the budget impact, and we know the most about that because we're not reappropriating any funds. There are no funds to reappropriate. So that one, of all of them, I feel the most certain about. And it is the one it's the biggest, it's the most impactful, and it includes a voted levy. So,
Just one more question. I guess my point is, if the resolution is intended to give notice to the public of increasing four specific non-voted levies in four specific district funds, the public doesn't know which four of these funds are the non-voted district funds. So what are they getting notice about? I mean, I'm just saying it's a little confusing perhaps to the public to try to figure out. In the introduction, it's identifying four district funds that are supported by non-voted levies. And so then you've got a list. And if you're a member of the public who is not an expert in school finance, then it's hard to tell which of those categories is the notice being given about. So just so I understand, what's the legal ramification if the board were to pass this resolution?
You're complying with a notice requirement.
Okay,
This will
and
go
that's
in
all
the
it is.
paper with the surrounding districts who have all done this. I met with other business managers who are also adding all of their funds. Not all of them, but most of the double A's are adding all of them for the same reason. The reason is, in a way, it doesn't matter which four, because we're saying, here's them all. You got them all. So if I look at these, if you don't know which four are the original required by the statute, it really doesn't matter, because I'm telling you, I'm giving you all of them.
Okay.
And the other districts really that are doing it for the same reason, is that come August, or even come time when you're looking at a ballot, you might say, well, why didn't I see that on that publication in the paper? And to avoid any, well, the intent was to avoid confusion. It was to add all of our estimates.
Okay, so just to clarify, so if the board votes, if the members of the elementary board vote to pass the resolution, it's just a resolution of intent to give notice to the public of an interest in increasing non-voted levies in four district funds.
It's a notice of intent to increase levies in all of these funds in these estimated amounts, not just four.
Oh.
Yeah, we're saying that despite the fact that it's supposed to be limited to four, we're providing it for all the district's levies to reduce confusion and increase transparency.
Okay, it's pretty confusing, but okay. Trustee Tucker.
I kind of want to support you, the chair, in this a little bit. If Chairman Holland is confused and educational funding is confusing to the public on a good day, might there be a better way to delineate this so that it's not confusing to the public? Because I think transparency in funding is a notable problem. The public complains about it, relentlessly. So is there a better way to formulate this?
Make a suggestion. In your box there, why don't you put voted levies and put all the voted levies underneath there, and then permissive levies that are not voted on underneath there, that delineates what has to be voted on and what doesn't need to be voted on.
Is the confusion the voted, or is the confusion the four that's in that first sentence? Because we could simply eliminate what's required and list the estimates of permissive levies in all of the district's funds, which the voted is a permissive, the general fund, that is a permissive levy. And
That's only part of it, right?
that's only part of it.
So I think what the confusion lies in, what is the public gonna vote on? What don't they have to vote on? So if they have to vote on a general fund, a part of a general fund levy, then that should go under the column that says, this is what you're gonna have to vote on. This is, and the other ones you aren't gonna vote on, because it's just gonna happen because of the statute. No, but the public doesn't.
T. Smith, a question?
I think, Pat, if I ask you this question and you answer it, it might make things a little clearer for the people that are there. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 items listed here. The statutory requirements that we are being asked to meet is to notify the public when we make changes to 4 of them. Those 4 happen to be permissive. There are other ones there that are permissive levies that are being increased that we, by statute, don't have to tell the public about. But we are deciding to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's 7 funds versus 4.
Right.
Yep.
The 2 voted ones say voted. The other 7 are permissive. 4 of those we have to tell by statute. The other 3 we could keep to ourselves and no one would, well, we would know, but it wouldn't be obvious, transparent for that word. I think that is the only problem. And if you wanted to meet Chairman Holland's, to avoid that confusion, you could put a little asterisk next to, I believe it's transportation, tuition, adult education, and
Building reserve.
building reserve.
Any other questions? Trustee Newbold?
Sorry, are there any questions? Sorry.
Okay. No more questions? Then, go ahead.
Going to respond to Mike. I mean, if it would make it clearer, then in the first sentence, when we're referencing provide notice of intent to increase non-voting levies in 4 district funds, right after 4 district funds, I could put in parentheses an asterisk, and then asterisk all those items that are required. And then rather than limit the estimates to permissive levies in 4 district funds, this notice contains projections for all of the district's levies. And I don't say permissive or voted, I say all of the district levies to reduce confusion and increase transparency. Would that help?
Yeah, do we have a motion, Marcia, already?
No, but someone can make a motion and amend the resolution in the motion by sticking in what Pat just said in asterisks.
That's why I'm asking that. So could I,
Sure. Well, first, okay, we've got questions and we've got a comment first. So first, the comment from the superintendent.
Certainly. So to Trustee Wake's point, there are 2 that are listed as voted. And you'll note that the recommendation that administration is advancing for the general fund voted levy contains the $305,008 request that we would like to include on the May ballot. The second that's listed as voted is building reserve voted, and you'll see that that's 0. We are not making a request for a voted building reserve. So the only one we're asking the public to vote on would be the second line item. And as referenced previously by a number of trustees, the others are permissive levies, 4 of which we need to notify the public. Our intent is try and get all the funds in front of the public, so it is as transparent as possible, and that's all we're attempting to accomplish.
Trustee Decker?
I just have a question as to why there's specificity about the building projects and whether that's required, and what the rationale is there.
Yeah, that's required. So when Senate Bill 307 was passed, part of what they did is they amended MCA 20-9-502. So it gave school districts through their board the flexibility to perform maintenance type projects via permissive levy through the building reserve fund. So we did this last year and did some work on Stagner Field and also some architect engineering work for the Missoula College. And so then this would be a continuation of that.
So one final question, hopefully. So as Superintendent Thane just indicated, the general dash voted line item, which is an increase of $305,008. That's going to be a decision made at a different time, whether or not that would happen. But you've included that information because the administration will be asking the board for that increase.
we're essentially tonight working to provide notice to the public of that intent and would ask the trustees to support it because we have a mail ballot and those ballots go out April 18th. So if we're going to get information out to the public and engage in a lot of interaction with civic groups, et cetera, we need to get busy about that business. So we have a number of events scheduled and are looking for affirmation on the part of the board tonight that it would be the intent to run that. The resolution for that would actually occur at the April.
This resolution?
No, for the final
April 5th.
resolution, April 5th.
So the final, the specific decision on that would be on April 5th. This is just providing notice as to all the recommended increases that the administration is getting. But we're not making the decision about that general voted increase and won't make that decision till the 5th.
This will be published in the paper as a resolution, and so, and then to Mark's point about or providing information about the voted levy, it would be good to know that we're going to go that route, is what I would say, tonight, even though, because this resolution will appear in the paper as a
Okay.
voted levy.
Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I mean, we've come full circle. My first question to Pat was, by voting on this, are we voting to run that amount? And the answer was yes. So I think we've come full circle, and I would like to call for a motion.
So is there a motion from an elementary trustee in whatever shape or form concerning the recommendation by the administration? Trustee Smith? Pardon?
Sorry. So we want to, you just need the wording for,
Well, you can vote to not accept the recommendation, you can vote to accept the
Okay,
recommendation. You
I
can
wanna-
vote to accept
I
it
wanna-
as amended.
as amended, and that includes the, what Pat said, right? With the asterisks. I don't have to repeat all that, do I?
Is it clear?
I would like to recommend that we accept the resolution with the amendments that Pat mentioned, referring to asterisks and identification of the statute stipulated permissive levies.
Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Campbell. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Decker?
By accepting this, by publishing this resolution, we are declaring an intent as to how the administration is proposing to fund the operations and needs of the school district via these different bits and funds of taxes. We're very interested, of course, in hearing people's ideas and comments and thoughts about that. Although I think it's really helpful, given that that's what we're asking people to wrap their minds around, this very complicated thing, to reiterate that the bond is included in this and that the overall tax impact of this is difficult to get to and an important thing for people to try to wrap their minds around. That's my comment, that by publishing this, we're not actually adopting these yet, because as you said, we're putting this on to the April 5th, was it?
Yeah, the April
Yes.
5th is the deadline to certify ballots.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my comment.
Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I think we talk about the needs of the district. I think we need to start to think in terms of needs versus wants. I am and have been frustrated for a long time over the fact that we just get piecemealed, just 300,000, just this, just that. And when I talk to people about us running a levy, they go, "What are you talking about? We just gave you a whole bunch of money." And they did give us a whole bunch of money. And my personal taxes have already gone up $800. So it's like, well, they'll only go up another $20. That's my $20. And I think the time has come for us to change the trajectory of the district spending. And we are, if we do put this in the paper, we are putting people on notice that we're running a $305,000 levy. Now, it'll cost us $35,000 to do it, so we're really talking $270,000. Now, it's an interesting night to have this because our accountant just told us we spend 55% of our budget on instruction. That means we spend 45% of our budget off of instruction. And we're trustees, and it's our job to direct and challenge the administration on the trajectory of our programming and of our spending. And I just think it's time to stop climbing the budget. And people are hurting. People are hurting. They're getting hit with thousands of dollars of tax increases. Businesses are closing all over town. And this, all these jobs related to all this construction that's going on right now, the jobs will go away, but the cost of paying for that bond will be here for 20 more years, long after the jobs are gone. So I think now is the time for us to change the direction and just say, no, we don't need to vote this 300,000. And it's funny when the school district wants it, we desperately need it, but when it's in my pocket, oh, it's just $20. And I think it's not, not just my pocket, everybody's pocket. We have a right to keep our money. The other thing to remember is that all our feeder districts are doing the same thing. And so the people in the feeder districts are going to get hit with their feeder district levy, plus the levy, plus the bonds in the feeder districts, plus the high school levy, and plus the high school bonds. So I would really like us to just say no to the general voted. We'll just put a 0 there and just start changing our trajectory toward a more frugal approach, because sometimes less is more. And maybe if we really, push the administration, we can come up with some creative solutions to this.
Any other board comment? Trustee Kendall?
I appreciate Diane's comments, although I pretty strongly disagree about most of it. And I don't think we have a clear understanding from that audit report about what exactly that means, instruction, how much the instruction is. I mean, I look at these things and, transportation may not be directly related to instruction, but if you can't get the kids to school, you can't instruct them. The same thing with, any one of these things. I mean, you have to have the buildings, you have to have the internet connections, you have to have the supplies. So, depending on how that calculation is made, it almost seems like it might be a distinction without a difference. I mean, it's basically all instruction. It's all, and then, we heard the presentation from the counselors earlier tonight about all the work they're doing with kids that's not specifically instruction. I would really love for us to spend more on the services that counselors provide in our district. If there was any way we could, I would so strongly support that. I don't think we can right now for some of the reasons you outlined, but we are providing an incredible service to our community, and it doesn't come for free. We have to all get together as a community and pay for it so that the increases are this tiny per home per year.
Any other board comment? Trustee Smith?
Well, I want to vocalize my support for this resolution and also for the 305,308 in the general voted, because I noticed, there's a lot of different ways you can look at these statistics, and you can say the 55% is instruction. That means 45% is not instruction. But as Heidi pointed out, we don't make widgets. We educate kids, and the teachers and we heard the Andrews and Jamulin people tell us that our numbers are good there. I see that across the board, we are not only in line with these other districts that are similar to us, but we're better in some cases and real close in most. I also noticed that when we look at the numbers, if you add that permissive and that general voted, we are actually $7 in the negative on the education, on the elementary side. I would also like to point out that the state, the funding that the state is changing is they're pushing it more and more down onto the local tax base. We know that's been happening and it's continuing to happen. That doesn't make it any easier to take those $5.38 every year and put it towards the school, but I don't think, I mean, enough is enough if we weren't going to ever give teachers raises, if we weren't ever going to make our schools better, if we weren't ever going to continue to invest, and if we weren't growing as a district with more kids. It's gonna cost more, because it just does. I mean, it's I think short-sighted to just say it's too much because it's more and because you're asking for more. I would love to be alive on that day when we can say, you know what, we're going to decrease all of your taxes because there's been some great funding mechanism or something happened, or all of the school districts won a lottery that they just get to do it. But that's not going to happen. So I support this. I think that the audit report we heard tonight tells me that our district is very wisely and very good stewards of the funds that we have, and they're spending them very well. We're accounting for them very well. And I hear, as Heidi mentioned, from the counselors and from the different programs that we have, they're all, I think, important. And so I'm going to support this wholeheartedly, and I hope that everyone else does.
Any other, trustee Newbold and trustee Decker?
I'd echo what both Heidi and Mike have said. And while I appreciate Diane's comments, I have a hard time zeroing out that $305,000 number that's been suggested because of the shift that's occurred with the legislature and because our debt service is increasing. I just think it's a reality that we are shouldering more of the burden and that this is what reflects that. And so if we have a problem, we need to correct it at the Montana legislature. However, I do agree with the comments about that I feel like we are seeing some of these things kind of piecemeal, that we'll see an isolated budget item or an isolated budget request, and it's hard to wrap that into the overall picture. But I think that that's probably a discussion that we need to have as a board in terms of how things are being presented and is there a better way to do that. But I'm going to vote for this.
I guess tagging on what trustee Newbold said a little bit, to me, when I hear a conversation about wants versus needs, I take that really seriously, and I think as a district we have to take that really seriously. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. I don't want to pay more taxes. Did we need to agree to a contract with the employees of our district that afforded them raises that were better than what's being offered around the state? I think to keep the best teachers here in Missoula and to keep great people here, I think we had to do that, and I'm really proud that we were able to do that. Did we have to? I mean, as a district, we've made decisions that we're now committed to, and we're committed to paying for as a community over the near term. To not fund what we've already made commitments to is not. It feels nice to be able to say that that would be like a want instead of a need, but we've made commitments to certain things and to providing a certain level of service to students, and we have to continue to be able to do that. To me, though, this conversation isn't separate from the conversation that we've begun to have as a board about what to do with our properties that are not in use. That's why I asked the question before about why it is that the Missoula College maintenance and improvements are appearing here in specificity, and we certainly will have other kinds of expenses coming up related to our buildings, and I think that's a place where we have to take a really hard look at how to look at the assets that we have as a district. I'm not interested in, I'm done.
Trustee McDonald.
Okay, excuse me, I'm kind of torn between both sides. I'm really supportive of the need that we have to continue to provide the best education for our children and, the place for them to be educated in. My whole problem with the whole thing, and we've mentioned it before, is just the whole piecemealing of it. That just kind of, it almost makes me feel like some stuff is kind of being hid from us and then just thrown out there at us, and that's the whole issue that I have that is making me be torn I support some of it, but I just, the way that it's presented, that just kind of makes me feel uncomfortable.
Any other board comments? Trustee Lorenz?
Well, one thing we have to remember that when we get an increase in enrollment, we get an increase in A and B allowable budget, and the state provides some percent, like 40%. So we will get funding from the state for the additional children that are coming into our district. Because we're a big district, we pack those classrooms. We have got every classroom pretty much at capacity. And if you think about how much money per child and how much we pay at one teacher in that classroom, we have a lot of discretionary income in this district. If we were a smaller district or a declining enrollment district, we might have 15 kids in a classroom and one teacher. But here, we might have 25 kids in that same classroom with one teacher, which gives us a lot of extra spending money, and I just feel like we have enough spending money, and it's time to slow down on how much we spend. I think the increase in enrollment is covered from what we get from the state.
Any other board comment? Even though it's an elementary item only, or do you want to?
Well, the next one.
Yeah, why don't you just wait till the next one? Yeah. Trustee Smith?
I'll just say that I think I have to disagree with Trustee Lorenzen with what you said about you can't take the number of kids in a classroom and multiply it by this number and then take what that teacher makes and say that they're not equal. That's extremely short-sighted, and it's just making a mockery of the system that we have. When we say, I don't see anything in here that says there's 45% of discretionary spending that we're just stowing away in the locker that we're not doing and we're not spending well. I have to just totally disagree with that comment.
Any other board comment? Seeing none, we have a seconded motion. All trustees in favor of the motion that's on the table, and if you want to have it read back, we can have Lenora read it back. Does everyone understand the motion? Seeing nods, then all trustees in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's Trustee Newbold, Trustee Kendall, Trustee Decker, Trustee Beers, and Trustee Smith. All those against? Trustee McDonald and Trustee Lorenzen. And so the motion carries. Now we move on to the parallel topic. So I'm guessing this one will not require quite as long of a discussion. That's just a prediction. So, any questions before I entertain a motion?
I don't have a question, but could I point something
Sure.
out?
Yeah.
And I put on, in front of everybody's spot, a revised resolution, and I have it sitting up on the screen there. Very little change, but in the general fund, we were working with OPI regarding an A and B item. So our we're one less A and B, which reduce our general permissive from 652. I'm sorry, it increased it from 652 to 655, and then our voted went down from 171 to 462 to 169, 994, and that's reflected on your sheet. Yeah, and so that has the similar reduction in the change in levies and the change in mills.
Okay. Any other questions? A question?
Can you explain the improvements in the fields for football practice?
Oh, yeah, so on the high school side, thank you for the question. So we have the corollary to the elementary piece with respect to the permissive levy, building reserve work, abatement work at Missoula College, roof replacement at the south building at Missoula College. And then the other piece involves some improvement contemplated at the Rattlesnake Fields to accommodate Hellgate High School. And right now, Hellgate High School is occupying and using the field down by the walking trail at the Riverfront Trail, and it's a shared use facility, and it's created quite a bit of safety issues, as I understand it, regarding well, basically use and overuse and holes and damage to the field where they try and practice. So this improvement would be on property that the district owns. The property down at the Riverfront Trail, we share ownership with the city. And then the property we own is up the Rattlesnake. We already have softball fields and soccer fields, and this would expand the fields there. And I listed Hellgate High School football team, but I really, to be fair, I'm not sure if it'd be limited to the football team, but that's who practices down at the River Bowl. So those would be the improvements.
Excuse me, I assume we're gonna see that issue again, or?
Actually, that would not necessarily be the case. If you approve the resolution tonight, then we would have access to the money through the permissive building reserve to further improve that property. And as Pat referenced, that property is property that the district owns, and most of the property is developed for the soccer and the softball complex. It would develop some property a little bit to the north and the west to accommodate football practices. As Pat referenced, similar to what occurred last year with Stagner Field when we approved the permissive building reserve, we essentially approved going forward on that progress, or on that project. We would come back to you with requests to go out for bids, et cetera. So you would have approval at that point in time. But in terms of the funding mechanism, tonight would essentially be your approval of the estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Because I was going to ask it in the last conversation, but the reason that the resolution identifies estimated tax impact on a $100,000 home and a $200,000 home, everyone asks why $100,000 homes, since there really isn't that's not a marketable home. That's the statutory language, so we're giving more notice about what is like, so people can actually start to understand that as your house's value goes up, this of course will go up in increments as well. But by statute, all we have to do is put in the impact on a $100,000 home, but it's always a question that I think we seem to get. So is that correct?
That's fair, and the statute, to be honest, I haven't, I don't recall it, if it referenced the 100 and 200. The ballot language does now say 100, 200, but you're totally right. It's a easy multiplier, and if, folks want to do the calculation, you can go onto the Montana site under the cadastral, under Montana government. You can insert search, type in Missoula, and then insert your last name. It'll find your property, and that'll give you your total value. And that's what we're shooting for here. You multiply your total value by 0.0135, and then times the mill change divided by 1,000 gives you the tax impact.
So, a question?
Yes.
Okay.
So, again, if I'm reading this correctly, if you are in the high school only district, your tax bill is actually going down by about $2 per $100,000 of value based on what the schools are asking of you. So this is our magic world, that, in a way, where our tax bill is in fact going down. They may get an increased tax bill from their local district, that's possible, and all kinds of other things, but from the commitments that person would have to pay taxes that go directly to MCPS, this estimate is that it would go down.
That's right, and I think it's fair to point out, and important to point out, that if you look at the building reserve voted, you have a $450,000 levy that's coming off the table, and that's a building reserve that's expiring. So it's done. We're over with that. And I don't have the slide that shows our mills, but our mills go up and down. And if you look at the high school in particular, we're at 70 mills in total 12, 13 years ago. And part of the fact of the matter is the tax valuations have gone up. So that also increases the mill value, lowers the overall mills. But it also reflects voted levies that come off the table. It also reflects, certainly in the elementary, we paid our bonds off the previous bonds about 8 years ago, and we had a stretch of 4 years with no debt. And right now, we're in the process of paying down our high school debt. This will only, on that side, improve because we'll continue to pay down that debt.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then I'll entertain any motion that anyone wants to make. Trustee Decker?
I move that we approve putting out this resolution with similar adjustments as made by Pat to the previous that make the specific funds identified more clear to voters. By asterisks and parenthetical, yeah.
About Resolution 2018-8S, that's the second one that was distributed to us, because it's just cents off the amount. Seconded by Trustee Duggar. Any board discussion? Trustee Duggar, it's your...
There was one of these fine trustees mentioned the pushback ought to be with the state legislature, and I just want to echo that. I think there's a lot wrong with the way that they do their entire tax structure. It's a discussion for another day, but it affects us greatly because I am sensitive to the local tax issue. But it seems that we don't have a choice if we're going to maintain a really good school system. No one, in the room it's not lost on anyone in here how different teacher pay and other available funds are between districts in this state, which is another huge problem that we don't have to go into tonight. But I just want to go on the record saying that I support this because I feel like we have to maintain our education system. We've got to pay our teachers and maintain our buildings.
Any other board discussion? Actually, I think I need to back, Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I guess for completeness, I have the same objections I had before. First of all, I believe it's another $35,000 to run this levy, and I know for sure we're not going to have trustee ballots on this one, so that would all be, so really we're running a $35,000 election to get $135,000. And again, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much money, and I still believe it's time for us to change our trajectory on spending.
I guess I'm not clear, and I don't know if I can make this a question, but Trustee Lorenzen mentioned we're not having a trustee. Corbin's seat is open, I know. I guess there was a mention made in Trustee Lorenzen's comment that we're not going to have a ballot for the election of trustee, but
We only have one if there are more than one candidate for each position. And as of our last meeting, we had this question, and the answer was there wasn't at that time.
oh, there wasn't any. Okay. Apologize.
Any board discussion? Further board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2018-8S, the more recent version, please indicate by raising your hand. That is Trustee Smith, Beers, Holland, Duggar, Decker, Kendall, and Newbold. All those opposed? Trustee Lorenzen and McDonald, so the motion passes. Thank you for that discussion. And then we'll move on to number 9, which is to award the bid for Hellgate High School school furniture and fixtures. Since Burley's homesick, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Thane. I had a question earlier about what the difference is between hard furniture and soft furniture, just for clarification purposes. So I don't know if you found out what that is.
Actually, it's just as clear as it sounds. Hard furniture would be things like tables, desks, et cetera. The soft furniture would be, upholstered chairs, softer furniture. So it's quite honestly that simple.
And So the recommendation is that the trustees award the vendors that are identified for the hard furniture. It's Missoula's Office City for the bid amount $70,289.34. And for the soft furniture, Montana School Equipment with the bid amount of $41,000. And this would be for Hellgate High School's furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Are there any questions of Superintendent Thane? Seeing none, is there a motion? Trustee Smith?
I move to accept the administration's recommendation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Newbold. Any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to award the bids to Missoula Office City and Missoula School Equipment in the amounts identified in the agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And I did note that Trustee Wake left. She has out-of-town family visiting. Then we move on to approve the use of elementary building reserve carryover funds. It's an elementary action item, and just to clarify the background, and then I'll turn it over to Trustee Thane. It appears there's already a funding source for one of the two vehicles, and so this particular recommendation is that the trustees approve the use of elementary building reserve carryover funds to cover the cost of the second purchase price for $35,000. So even though it says two operation and maintenance department vehicles in the recommendation, one of them already has a funding source. Is that right?
Again, you'll note that the request here is actually below the bid amount, but it's been the history in this district that when we look to access funds like the Building Reserve Carryover Fund, we seek authorization from the trustees to do so. So as Chair Holland referenced in the background, contained in the high school building reserve account, which is expiring this year, there is money set aside for the purchase of one vehicle. There's a second vehicle, however, that needs to be replaced. It's a 1983 pickup that is used by the carpenters, so it's 35 years old. It's in need of some significant repairs, and it's estimated right now that the cost of repairs is greater than the value of the vehicle. So the recommendation is to approach the trustees to access funds in the elementary building reserve carryover, because there's not presently an elementary building reserve, to purchase that second vehicle. The aggregate of the two vehicles is listed as $70,000. That would be for new vehicles. Burley will be exploring whether there are any late model used vehicles available, but needs authorizations from the trustees essentially for purchase of the second vehicle.
Any questions of Superintendent Thane? Seeing none, then it's an elementary action item. Is there a motion from an elementary trustee to approve the use of elementary building reserve carryover funds to cover approximately $35,000 for the purchase price of one of the two operations and maintenance department vehicles? Moved by Trustee McDonald. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Kendall. Is there any board discussion? I'm just amazed that it hasn't rusted out already.
Actually, it is.
Oh, okay. Any public comment? Seeing none, all elementary trustees in favor of approving the use of the elementary building reserve carryover funds to cover the $35,000 approximate cost of the purchase of one of the two operation and maintenance department vehicles replacements, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all elementary trustees. Then we move on to the personnel report. It's found on page 35. Dave, is there anything of note within the report?
No, this would be a typical report. It's actually pretty small this month.
Any questions of Dave or motion? Question?
I have a question. Okay, I actually have two questions, and they're both on page 41. We have a position that says new funded by the school. How is that different than what we typically do? That's my first question. On page 41, it's an assistant track coach.
Oh, the one that's identifying that they are funding an assistant track coach over there?
It says new, funded by Big Sky. It doesn't say replacement or any, it just, see, I didn't know, is that different? Are they usually not funded by the school?
You know, and I can't answer that question. Do you know off the top of your head?
I would suspect that that's funded from Fund 15, which would be gate receipts and white fees, those kinds of things that
Oh,
come
yeah.
into play.
Fund 15, okay. And then,
And the second question you
my
had?
second question on the same page, we're looking at a year-long leave of absence and a sabbatical leave for 2 Hellgate High School science teachers. Are we concerned that this might be detrimental to the programming at Hellgate High School?
The leave of absence or the
There's-
sabbatical leaves?
There's two at the same high school, full-time science teachers.
No,
They're, right, there's one that's a leave of absence and one is a sabbatical leave, which,
we have a leave of absence that's returning there's one leave of absence that's returning that's identified at Hellgate High School.
okay, look about,
Above that, so we have one at Sentinel and we have one at Hellgate.
okay, then above that. Above that.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. No, I'm not concerned about it. When we have a leave of absence request come in, that is something that's reviewed by the building principal, and they look at the staffing, and so they do go through that and make those determinations. The building principal is not involved in the sabbatical leave request, that would be true. And it's not something that we take into consideration when the committee is reviewing sabbatical leave request.
So you're saying that these decisions were made by 2 independent people and the net impact on the school maybe didn't get reviewed?
I would say that they are reviewed by 2 different sets of people, that's correct. But are you concerned that there's a programmatic impact on it?
Yes.
And I would have to actually address that with the principal, and I'd be glad to do that with you and get back. But you're correct, that is not something that we take into account when we are looking at those things independently. The sabbatical request committee meets and reviews based on criteria that we've set out that's independent of looking at a programmatic impact that it might have at that building. I do think you'd be correct. We haven't had multiple leaves of absence, but for example, I think you're correct that if we had a circumstance where we had 2 or 3 people within the same department at a high school, or let's say even a grade level, requesting leave of absence, yeah, I think that we would look at that very seriously.
I would be interested to know that you followed up with the principal on that.
I'll do so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. So, seeing no questions, then is there a motion to accept the personnel report that is attached to the agenda? Moved by trustee Kendall and seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, then any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of accepting the personnel report that is attached on page 35, or beginning on page 35, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to approving the first reading of Board Policy 2159, parental involvement at Title I. And I think we had seen it as an information-only item in the past, or?
We have talked about this previously. We came to you with a revision to Board Policy 2160 to come into full compliance with the recommendations for policy related to Title I. Attendant to that policy was Board Policy 2160P, which was the procedure statement that was specific to parent engagement in Title I programs. We also have Board Policy 4100, which is titled simply Family Engagement. So there was some redundancy in our policies. So Megan worked to unify the 2 policies. You'll note that the draft, which begins on page 44 and for which we're requesting approval on first reading, incorporates the elements in the first half from Board Policy 4100 on family engagement, and then is specific in the second half to family engagement related to Title I. So it's the administrative team's recommendation that we approve on first reading, Board Policy 2159. After it's posted for public comment, and if the board formally adopts it, we'll come back to you with a recommendation to remove from the policy manual Board Policy 4100 and Board Policy 2160P.
Any questions? So I just have 2 things. One, that in the agenda, it's indicated that the board policy is called Parental Involvement Title I, but that didn't get carried over to the actual draft. So if we can just amend that to include Title I at the caption. just so that people understand that this has language included in it that's specific to Title I. And number two, it indicates in the recommendation that we approve the policy at a meeting that's already been canceled, so we need to change the date, so the first meeting in April, which would give us adequate time for notification as well. So it would be anticipated that we would approve the policy in its final, at the second reading after opportunity for public comment at the April meeting. I just don't have the date because I don't have a calendar, but whatever that second Tuesday in April is. So with those questions, is there any additional, are there any additional questions for Superintendent Thane? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the first reading of Board Policy 2159, Parental Involvement - Title I, as amended, and authorize posting for public comment? Moved by Trustee Smith, second by Trustee Kendall. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Decker?
So, believe me, I don't want to get into a big policy wordsmithing thing, but I think just in our policies, obviously, we want to be really careful about what we promise, because what we promise in our policies is what we in fact promise. And so it's very difficult to promise that every family feel welcomed and et cetera. It is possible to promise that we will do everything in our power to achieve that end. Just as we go through, it may make sense to send those kind of wordsmithing comments to administration, but just in policy, we want to be careful of what we promise, because what we promise, we need to be able to come through with.
Any other comments? Trustee Beers?
Yeah, I certainly, I like what I hear in this as policy, and to make some of those promises, not just to improve quality for students, but to address family, and in particular with Title I programs, as in other programs with struggling students or underserved populations. You can't isolate it to students. You have to engage the entire family and make them feel welcome, because in a lot of cases, you're not just dealing with a student in 2018 that's having a bad interaction with the school, you're dealing with generations of people in that family that have had bad interactions with school. So that can be a very large barrier when it comes to that individual student. So putting policies in place that recognize that and move to correct some of those things, I think is a great model to have and to exemplify. So I like a lot of these bullet points.
Any other public comment? Sure.
Just in response to Trustee Decker's concern, the second bulleted point, which does say ensure parents and families, is actually attendant to the sentence above, which ends with a semicolon that says the superintendent shall undertake activities with respect to engagement. So again, it's our activities that are guaranteed. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that everybody will feel welcomed.
Any other, are we on, do we have a motion? Okay, so any other questions? So with no further questions, we have a motion. Okay. Sorry. Motion by Trustee Smith and seconded by Trustee Kendall. Okay. So, and no additional board discussion? Any public comment? And seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the first reading of Board Policy 2159, Parental Involvement - Title I, or all elementary trustees, and authorizing posting for public comment, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all elementary trustees present. We move on to another elementary action item, which is to approve the early learning program calendar for 2018-2019. It's, Dave, is there anything you'd like to point out about that particular calendar?
Sure. I would remind you that about 2 months ago, we adopted both the elementary and the high school calendar, and off of that, then the next 3 agenda items are the remaining calendars within the district for next year. So we brought them all at once. So the first one is the early learning program. It pretty much mirrors the already adopted one for the elementary. The only thing I would note that's different about it is that it starts in September, after Labor Day. It doesn't start in August like the other one. The only constraint we have with hours, I believe, is that we can't have students in school for more than 3 hours a day. So it's not a total number of hours, it's just the restriction of a maximum of 3 hours per day per student.
Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, is there a motion from an elementary trust?
There is.
Trustee Smith?
Just a quick question, Dave, on the Sealy Swan High School, and I think I know the answer.
We're not on Sealy yet?
Oh, we're only doing one at a time?
We're on early learning.
Sorry.
They're actually all slightly different from one another, so.
Okay. Any questions about the early learning calendar?
Other than the fact that we have an unscheduled day before school starts? Is that just a function of because it's in the regular calendar?
Yes, and it also provides an opportunity for everybody to get together and to do some planning, so.
Okay, so the teachers are they're in that day? Good.
Yes.
Any other questions for Dave? Seeing no more questions, is there a motion from an elementary trustee to approve the early learning program for 2018-2019 that's been attached to the agenda? Moved by trustee Kendall. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee McDonald. Any board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none, all elementary trustees in favor of approving the 2018-2019 early learning program calendar, please indicate by raising your hand. That's unanimous as to elementary trustees present. Then we move on to Sealy Swan calendar. And so, Dave, anything you want to point out? And then it sounds like trustee Smith has a question.
You bet. I'm going to see if I can anticipate trustee Smith's question. The calendar mirrors the high school calendar with the exception that you'll note that it ends June 6th. On the high school calendars, the other ones adopted, it was June 13th. So in order to accommodate on their 4-day week schedule, what they've done is schedule of Fridays within that. So there's several Fridays that are kind of intermittently spaced throughout the year, and I feel bad for the student trustee who spoke earlier tonight, really celebrating the 4-day week. She's in for a surprise next year, but, oh.
Most of those are still 4-day weeks.
Yes, they are, and that was the intent of the calendar committee at Sealy. When there's a Monday holiday, they scheduled school on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
No questions.
So no question. Anyone else have a question? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the Sealy Swan High School 2018-2019 school year calendar? Moved by trustee Smith, seconded by trustee Lorenz. I saw that arm up first. Any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the Sealy Swan High School 2018-2019 calendar, please indicate by raising your hand. That's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on the same for Willard. Is anything you want to point out? I'm assuming there's something slightly different about Willard.
Willard is very slightly different. There's a trade-off between a date, April to March, but otherwise it mirrors the existing high school schedule almost exactly. I should say exactly, except for that one switch.
Any questions for Dave about the calendar? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the Willard Alternative High School calendar for 2018-2019? Moved by trustee Decker and seconded by trustee Duggar. Any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all those in favor of approving the Willard High School calendar for 2018-2019, please indicate by raising your hand. That's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 6, which is to approve an increase to adult education tuition rates and compensation rates. And so Dave, do you want to explain? It looks like there's requests in a few areas since the compensation rates have not been looked at, it looks like, since January 1st, 2015.
Right, so the rates, Monique had asked that we review and see if we can make an increases in both. If you look at it, there's two different things going on. There's the increases for instructional rate, department chair rates, tutor rates, and professional instructional rates. And to offset those, then it would, and to make sure that we wouldn't be looking for other district monies or having other increases on levies, that they would increase the base rate for tuition by 15 cents per hour. The things that we considered with this request is that, for example, the instructional rate, which goes to $29 per hour, how does that how is that commensurate, say, with the CBA for the MEA? That instructional rate right now is at $30 an hour, will increase, so this will still be slightly below the MEA rates that we have. The tutor rate, which is the most significant increase from $11.75 to $14.50 per hour, is actually still less than the MMCO rate that we have for tutors currently. And the very reason that they wanted to do that was their inability to hire tutors, which is also why we had previously raised our ELL rates, tutor rates. So as you stated, Trustee Holland, at the beginning, this has been static for the last 3 years, and so she's thinking it's time to move those rates to make sure they can hire instructors.
Any questions for Dave?
I was curious about comparison of these instructor rates to other instructors who are doing the same kinds of things in our area. I work in adult education myself, and so I have an interest in this area, and both the cost for classes seems pretty low in comparison to what people pay for lots of different kinds of classes from lots of other providers, including the one I work for, and the rate for instructors seems on the high end. But the comparison to the cost of instructors who are instructing certified teachers at, say, an MEA event, that might be one type of instruction, but I'm curious about whether there are differences in what kind of classes are being taught and so on. So that's the rate for instructors, what the comparison is based on.
And I can't answer the question as to comparative rates around the community for those adult instructions and what those might look like. What we did is just, like I said, I'm making the comparison, as you just pointed out, to the CBA and the MEA rates that we're paying. So are we fairly close with that? We didn't want to come before the board and request rates that were higher for those instructional rates than we would actually be paying our teachers in similar positions. So we can, I can do a cost analysis or a comparison and talk to Monique Foreman if you'd like me to do that, and to determine, are these rates commensurate with what is generally allowed? That's what you're asking, correct?
I guess so, yeah, and also the question of what the classes cost and whether these programs are self-funding.
They are self-funding. So that the rate increase here would offset any increases with it. That's the way, when she added the 15 cents per hour for the instruction. So it would offset the additional raises.
Any other questions for Dave? Seeing none, then, is there a motion to approve the identified increases to the adult education tuition rate and compensation rates as explained in the agenda, and it would be effective July 1st, 2018. Is there such a motion? Moved by Trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Duggar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the increases as identified in the agenda to the adult education tuition rate and compensation rates effective July 1st, 2018, please indicate by raising your hands. It's all trustees except Trustee Decker. And is there anyone opposed? And Trustee Decker is opposed. Then the motion passes, and then we move on to number 7, which is to approve increases to wages and salary rates for summer and seasonal positions, which include lawn trimmers, custodians, site servers, and it would be an increase from $9.50 to $10. And Dave, do you have any additional information on that point?
I do. So again, so the rate requests are limited to just those seasonal workers, and these are not people that are under our existing contracts. One of the things to keep in consideration is that if we have an MMCEO member who takes over as a site server in the summer or becomes a seasonal custodian, they're actually paid under the contract the rate that they're earning during the school year. So what this actually means, when we're talking the 50 cents an hour, I actually ran the numbers just so we would know what the impact would be. Last summer, this would have been 11 people that would have been affected by this 50 cents per hour. The total cost over the entire summer for those 11 people would have been $1,640. So overall, it's fairly minimal, and again, it's about recruiting for these positions because Missoula is becoming a bit more competitive, and so that was the reason behind raising it to $10 an hour.
Any questions for Dave? Trustee Smith?
Just out of curiosity, because these are summer seasonal positions, and I think you just mentioned that, if I understood you, if someone's already working with the district as a certified? No, as a
Classified.
classified?
Yeah.
Then they can apply for these jobs, do they get like, or they
Oh,
just?
yes, they can apply for those positions. So, if an existing custodian, say at a high school,
Right.
could say, I'd like to, I'd like to continue, well, that's actually not a good example, but we have some custodians that might not be working during the year, so we have others that
Okay.
can come on for additional work that's added on.
Right, so if someone's not working otherwise for the
Right.
district in those 3 months? or-
Right, and last year that accounted to 3 people
Oh,
that we hired for that.
okay, thank you, that's my question.
Any other questions? I just have one. What's a site server?
Those are people that would be serving lunches at the school sites.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Just didn't know what it meant. Yeah, that's good to know. Is there a motion to approve the increase from $9.50 to $10 per hour for the identified summer and seasonal positions as described in the agenda? Yep. Moved by trustee Decker, seconded by trustee Kendall. Any board discussion? See none. Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the increase from $9.50 to $10 per hour, please indicate by raising your hand. It's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to public comment on non-agenda items. As I indicated at the beginning, we'll also allow public comment on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting for someone who couldn't get here at the beginning. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, then we're adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your persistence.